governing body is realize that sometimes what you hear in council, you may have to think a little bit more about what the broader community actually thinks is for the better good and most, majority of the scholars.
By the inbox. 30,000. Right. Yeah. Well, and I'm going to see if we were able to this technology test here for a moment, but the balance you're describing, oops, not that one. Oh, sorry. Well, I'm drinking this back. The different hats you wear, right? And so, there are different roles that you have to perform as an elected body, and sometimes you have to change them, right? And you have to be alert to them. Part of it is, being a representative and yes, listening to and being a representative of your community. There's also an important role of steward, right? And so you are looking for the greater good and making sure that you can maintain progress on long-term expectations for the better of that community. Thinking strategic, the strategic thinker is another role that you have to perform. And these are our different lenses, oversight, and just the brass tacks of being, fiscally responsible and making sure that everybody is accountable to the work that you're doing. And Mr. Trustee, I think is a glance. I did it down. Okay, good. Excellent. Thank you. That was a trick question. Well, just to share it. But the important point here is that at different points in time and with different topics and items that come before you, you're going to think on all of them are important. And so if you get sidelined into one specific lane and you're only thinking about, I'm an advocate, I'm a representative of the community, then you're missing an important premise, what it means to be an effective person. So.
Yeah, I'm on the point of transparency. I don't think that always means about doing what the organization. I think one of the things up here also is, populist pandering is something that's that. But I think it's like, when you make a decision, being able to explain to me why you came to that decision. I think it's experiencing, you know, disagree with public, but doing so in a respectful manner. It's listen to me.
I'd like to back up on how I made flag. If Deputy Council President.
Listen to me. 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 Listen to me.
I'll expand on that. We have had a policy over the last couple of years as to how council members should bring business.
Listen to me.
The question is that policy working? And and if not, well, what changes?
Listen to me. Listen to me.
IFRAC? Sorry, I missed how public brings issues.
No.
Council new business requests.
Listen to me. Listen to me.
On like for one second. I mean, how we solve that, but just like that if we don't do a good job at that, and I probably a better job at that, then the outlets for those are essentially the right side of these columns. You said, if you're not trying to fix that, alternate.
Listen to me. Listen to me. Listen to me. Listen to me.
Are these things that you have documented in a handbook or policy?
We have the process currently.
Okay, so maybe as fresh as
yes. I think you're hearing that not everyone's happy with that process.
Yep. Right. Listen to me. Do you want to bring it over today to talk about that are specific main points, or is that better to bring back as involved?
I'll cut through.
Okay. All right. Yeah.
So I think what the council wants is a policy that allows them to put main money down with the so we could go up to 5 people. We were talking about this. I mean, there are, probably half a dozen ways communities do this. House member, when they're good at the order, can make motion. Some communities, motion is good enough. And then in other communities, takes motion in a second. Get a motion to second this. So some communities get a motion in a second and a majority vote of the council to put it. And then it usually comes back at the next meeting or maybe 2 meetings, depending on what the policy says, and gets discussed for next steps. So my sense is that's what you want. So you just all have to decide how much of the body needs to agree or something. My sense is that, and I've experienced this, when one person can do it, it's, and that was then I had outsiders who would come with 15 things every meeting. And all they had to do was propose that they didn't need a second, they didn't need a vote. And then ultimately they came down to a vote so that you would need majority of your colleagues to agree with you to move that forward. So it's probably, if not a majority, maybe 1 or 2 others on embedding that. I think the caution, of course, is not this group, but if somebody else comes on the council and says, okay, I'm going to use this as my own bully pulpit, and then drags you all. And that's what other council members hate, is when one person can say, these are my priorities, and now I'm going to force you all back to them. So if you can come up with something that doesn't do that, and that's fine. I think from the administration standpoint here, if correct me if I'm wrong, we just worry about being inundated. Because in some communities, I'm sure you took plenty of examples, in some communities, everything stops because all the council is doing is responding to those group items discussed versus trying to do them up front in a process like this and say, okay, these are our priorities. We're going to work on them through the next 3, 6, 9 months versus every meeting setting new priorities because someone's come up with the latest grades.
Well, I will always mention too is that there is an impact on capacity, the staff too, when there are lots of ideas generated, because if each one, even if it feels like it's an everything thing, still has the need to spend time. So your intentionality behind, where together you want to move people forward for further conversation.
I like the idea of a second or a second and a third. Here's why. It allows me to lobby an idea without having to worry about getting crosswise of opinion. Right? If I wake up tomorrow morning and say, by God, we need a dog park to the end of 2026, right? I can go see if I can find 1 or 2 other council members who are excited about that. But I think the idea, the current policy is, it's like, well, since I use, you guys kind of want to know where the will of the body is, and I can't go figure that out without breaking. And I'm concerned about it going wrong. I agree that would be bad if that's go wrong. I also think that if we see that happen, we can presumably adjust our rules that way. It does happen. Sure. But I'll caution and ask. It's not as easy as you think. I can, because then that individual says, you are stifling me. If you, Councilmember Nichols, don't want to talk about things I want to talk about, so you're trying to change the policy to stifle me, and here are 20 of my friends who are now going to spend 5 minutes each of the day at the podium saying how horrible you are for stifling. So hopefully you pick something that's going to last. If it would be better to pick the right number, but it's not. We're not having this zone decisions. You can always just.
And I think there's a few other ways that we could approach this. The way we had done was council new business request process. We do also have maybe the process for setting the annual work plan and maybe involvement there. The mayor has also called individual meetings on certain policy areas, which is going to give us another area input. So I think there's a lot of approaches that we could take at some point, trying to figure out what the best process for this and set that into our policies. We got it.
There are lots of different dimensions that could be explored with this, and certainly lots of examples that you could look to from other communities that have been tested, and you can decide, ultimately it has to fit here, right, as what your needs are, but there are plenty of examples, and just going in eyes wide open in terms of what the choices between us might be. But understanding that there's important value in raising, bringing forward ideas as they come forward, but also recognizing when you have work plan and other things that you've decided as a body that you want to work on. You want to make sure that you don't individually and have all that fun. So sometimes that's the ping pong is what can happen if not passionate. All right, we're moving back. Good conversation, important. Sounds like to spend some more time on, so we'll make sure that comes back to. Let's look at the other questions too. And I want to get into the specific discussion around expectations of each other and higher. So what values are important to you in government? What are the things that you bring to the table?
One thing that I think has always worked well for us is an surprise. So being able to, I feel like we have had a very responsive, strengthened council leadership to be able to say, okay, this is something that I'm going to come up, and there are exceptions, obviously, if something comes up during meeting, but I think that ideal, keeping everybody informed ahead of time rather than coming in with big.
Yeah, well, this is, sounds like in practice what you've been doing, and that's certainly what brings some of our expectation for working, together, but also with the administration, right? And not keeping these, I tell you, it's when things, it's great when things are working really well. It's when things start to not work well for whatever reason, and and always see it coming. To be able to say this is bad. Right, Mr. President. What other values do you bring?
Say a lack of ego, that this isn't about us. This isn't about us as people. This is about, it's the city that we're doing all this for. So we have arguments and things like that. This isn't attack on any individual. This is about pride of being at something. This is not about us at all. This is something that, yeah.
Your opening up is about, good governance, it's about the community, and that's the same idea. But that's well.
Pretty basic integrity, respect. And then I think another thing that's important is preparedness to know public gets to show up having done our over packages and ready to know ask questions made.
So I want to boldly say something kind of crucial. On the preparedness side of things, we have swung, maybe it was during the COVID era, we swung from having lots of in-depth presentations from our staff to read the packet and get ready to talk about that. I think we have swung too far. And I'm interested to hear what other people think, but I think we have swung too far. And one of the reasons I think we don't get as much public engagement as we used to get, there's the fact we don't have the Issaquah grass, there's post-COVID, all that kind of stuff. I think is also that there isn't a lot to grab onto, or there isn't as much to grab onto at council meetings as it used to be. And I'm not looking for 7-hour, 45-minute meetings. Sounds like we have the time. But I would humbly suggest that I think we have swung too far, and that we don't provide enough in situ teeing up of the issues before we launch into that. If the public comes to a council meeting, I think they're getting very, very, very light set of presentations from staff, and then you get council debating about it.
But why would so would be the agenda then plus more of an executive summary of staff of what would be
I think it's 5 slides per topic, right? That just says, here's the issue, here's it isn't a restating of the, you guys do a very, very good job at executive summaries. But it's here's the issue, some pictures, right? I'm a very visual engineer. A lot of times we're having conversations about land use or things going on in the city, and we don't see up pictures anymore like we used to when we're talking about issues, as an example of what I guess and what I think the public is. As long as that does result in a reduction of pixel in the packet. Some of us, would like to be saying pixel, we'll go into it. Well, in the old days, we still had 500-page packets, but we also, like I said, I'm just talking 3 to 5 slides per topic, right? That just says, here's what the issue is, here's the salient points. You guys always do put a slide up that says, here's what we're asking, right? Here's the questions that we're asking today. But the thing before that, I think we don't do so well.
Maybe the topic, for the broader perspective. All right.
Rescind the
I think that doesn't even necessarily go to fairness. I think it's just like, what is people here and like how does this for their goal, I think would be helped and remind everyone because I think we're all a little bit in the weeds. And I think the presentation, honestly, they get very weepsy at times, perhaps at the expense of, like for someone, especially for me, like none of the gay, just coming in cold for every weekend you like one sonic. And then I think, trying to understand what's the context, what's the goal here, how everything fits in. I think some of that more context setting. And perhaps that even makes the presentation to be a bit more high level and, in terms of maybe we'd actually don't spend as much time to talk about it, right? Like, here's the schedule of when road work is going to happen at this looking like we can just look at it. We don't need to read out every single thing. So, I think finding that right balance of going into detail in the presentation versus, how, because it sounds to me like what you're saying is we need more of that context, which I totally agree. It's like context setting, make sure everyone's on the same page if you're not as.
So increase addition, context setting, bigger picture, and in the packet still having the detail that with the page.
And for that idea, I kind of come into my preparation for the meeting feeling like if I read the packet and the memo and the staff information, I don't also have to look through the slides to get all of the information because I know I'm going to get that at the meeting. There have been some instances where I got information from the slides that wasn't in the memo, and that is a little bit of a government system. But for the most part,
I mean, I will honestly say, I don't read every 500-page packet front to back. Not on a Thursday. I have a
this is a shock to the system.
I start with the staff summary, and then I decide what details I need to dive into from there. But I would also, I think an example of something where we did have a good amount of detail, and I'm struggling to remember if we did that in full council or just committee, was on bicycle policy or electric bike policy, right? And staff put together a decent amount of, okay, here's a matrix of the type of vehicle, the situation. That kind of detail, I liked that because that's how we used to do it, and it felt more like that. We did that full council, right? And so just because full council. Yeah, like that's the kind of detail I'd like to see more of in working together issues.
So what's the difference between a presentation of the committee and presentation of council?
Yeah, are we okay with having the information repeated? And
that's because I feedback from you that says heard it in committee, then it should be higher levels. The purpose of the committee is to dive into the details. And so council members who serve on the committee told me they don't want to hear exactly the same presentation again at council because that's what it reads. So,
but we leaves the context portion. Maybe is the piece that needs to come out more than the details. I guess
because your staff, some of your staff, I'll say your staff wants to give you every little nugget.
I do.
And what I try to do is I try to hold them back. Say, fine, put the nuggets in the staff report. The council members don't want to get it because this is a time management issue too. I think an idea of adding a section to everything that's background of context, a couple slide killers, you can do that. But the push and pull event again back to the committees, our direction of block or the president, each of the committee, that's what the committee is for. It's doing the work for the council, so the council doesn't have to do the work of this section. So if that's the case, we can continue to do that, but make sure that context background appears both things. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I was going to add a point here as the new person that does not have the full background in this. And so this question to me kind of sounded to me like, what's the intent to these changes in terms of like, are we trying to make this better for council to make a decision, or are we trying to make the public have more access to this information? Mm-hmm. Which goal are we trying to achieve in this? It is kind of crucial how this is going to be handled. If it's more for the public or is it more for us? and try and meet that goal, depending on what that decided to be.
Well, I mean, to use the electric bike example, it is a potentially contentious issue. Members of the community that think that it's dumb for us to be restricting their use of electric bikes in any capacity. Right. So to the extent that we can provide publicly the rationale behind the decisions that we make, I think it's valuable for us as a council and valuable. So if you just say, at committee, I want to pivot back to while it's coming on detail. Right about detail. My expectation in committee is if we have an ordinance, that committee reviews every plan here. So the ordinance itself is only typically 4, 6, 8 pages, right? But that full council doesn't do every ordinance, right? We don't need, in recent years, we haven't done as much writing of ordinances as we did previously. But at least on ordinances, that is the answer to your question about level of detail. Well, PDE does.
Sadly, taking my line.
Yeah, but certainly not at full council, right?
Right, they did.
So I think that's I think a good example of what the committee should operate is that then the committee came to full council each time there was some piece and kind of summarized the discussion. I mean, I will say the discussion of the overpass is an example of where I think there was not enough detail in full council to have a public section. Right. There was a lot of detail in the content, but I think the decisions that we made that night would have been a little bit hard to follow by the public because there wasn't as much technical information as it would have been historically. So is there at least there a consensus to that?
It's in the building, that item. So,
But I mean, part of my job is gamekeeper and to try to manage things. I just want to make work for me to do all of this. It just adds elapsed time. And it's repeating in some respects what's already in the packet. And if we get back to Councilmember Garrett's issue about who is the audience, if the audience is the community, then this makes great sense. I'm just not convinced that you're all there.
Is there a role for committees to suggest what needs more detailed context? It's the full Councilmember, because it becomes a default for everything. Like asked about this form that you have for every day, the agenda. I can see that the time burdensome and out for any type of printing public tip. There, I think, is a role for discretion in what those are. There's some the crash these suggestions from the committees.
I love that idea. Yeah. Because at every committee, there's a point where you say, now, is this going on consent or is this going on regular business? You can also say, what do you want to see? How much data is this? And so for those things, I'm very business. What is that? Well, that's easily done. So if that's sort of a guidepost, we could try and then again, we'll add Tisha. I'll ask you for any comment. If we add to there's sort of a format to what we requested the parties to do in presentations. And why here was the requested action. We ask him twice. So if we do a background context piece, that makes sense, right? And that's not focus.
something at the end that says how much information should come to.
Well, and that the staff to the committee.
Yes.
Yeah. So between Andrew and
because for trust your committees to do that first line work thing.
Yep.
And that's why we have the committees. If not, we would do everything in council the whole by policy choice. So I think the committees serve that purpose.
Great. It's one area I noticed where the road program would have been the Spanish road closure discussion. We always needed to have a headline slide. It said 6 weeks in March and April. It's closed. And from July to November, that road, like we had a slide that had every permutation of Newport and Spanish Road of which ones were there. And it was hard to discern, I think, for people who lived in that community, the exact which road which ones and things are in our job. And I think it would be helpful for council to have that same summary and pulse point, helpful for the community to watch. Anybody who watched that presentation say, I'm interested in how this can impact me, we can do, I think, a better job of kind of spelling out, these are the main impacts. And now we're going to give you a little bit broader sense of what's happening. But the main thing, if you're just going to watch 30 seconds of this, is your world's going to be closed for 6 weeks, coming up in a couple months, and then it's going to be closed for 5 months.
All of a sudden, I'm interested in coming to the meetings.
Very good.
All right, so using the committees to help inform the level of detail, but really around helping to set context for those big, important, perhaps more complex issues or topics that come before. But what I also heard was obviously the community is part of the audience, but also within the body to frame it and that help to address the question of, of what, right? You have the impact of a decision I'm moving forward. So just kind of zooming it up to make sure that that's crystal clear. Audience, so I'm hearing that. So, okay, great. All right, well, let's look at that last question there, and then I want to come.
I've got one more thing, Gus.
Sorry, yes, please.
It's an observation that I have from other boards. So I had limited time on our council, though I've been in 2 calendar years. It's about 2 months total experience, so I'm not particularly much to that. And just from the perspective of working on both startup boards as well as government boards, an observation that I have is that the startups that I've done boards with that are most successful are those where the boards can really and openly criticize and provide helpful oversight in a way where you're all the same page. You and get the startup existence. But that's a key function of those bodies. It's to not just be a rubber stamp. And the ones that I'm still on have done that effectively. The ones that I'm not, when it was effectively a rubber stamp for CEO and customer, they don't exist. Alternatively, I'm on a federal board right now that is effectively a rubber stamp for the federal lead of that. It continues, it can definitely, because there's no selective pressure. So we're in government, I think we have this, we can't fall in traps where we aren't able to, where boards cannot necessarily get feedback. There's not necessarily a good quick cycle for turnaround to tell you if you're doing good enough support if you have questions, but there's so often. So from a good government's goal in general that I like to see, it's a culture where that's accepted and embraced as being helpful, and where a rubber stamp is frankly not even desired.
Forming better policy through discussion and debate.
There's an on where it's like, the comforting discussion that between the results of that is something that's better than what
Well, I think an underlying principle that is so important to make that something that doesn't go south in terms of relationships and all that is really clear understanding of your why, and so we get intent and media, and that you're here for the community. That's why, and for that, and then how you do that, right? And so bringing new perspectives, new ideas, different opinions to the table can be healthy in a respectful manner. And so it doesn't mean just the how is what's important by that, to be able to develop a robust conversation and perspective sharing.
Well, I think the job, like if I would use my state investment for examples, and for a lot of that feel like we're rubber stamping staff. But then I have to explain to people, we've done a retreat, so we've told them we want this percentage in real estate, this percentage in fixed income, this percentage in equities. And then they come back with their best proposal. So it looks like we're rubber stamping them, but we're just telling them what we as a board have decided we want the mix to look like. And so sometimes I think when you have the high functioning organizations, I think you guys are giving us really good direction in terms of, the priorities. And that's what I hope we walk out of here kind of today with. And then I think it's our job to come back and say, hey, based on what we heard, here's the best ways we think we can kind of achieve some of those goals. And so that is sort of the challenge. And I think on committees that I chaired, I think it was always useful to try that you could get consensus if doing better public policy. And so I think our hope is, I think in the administration, as we have challenging issues, I would rather push it back a month to figure out how to address as many of the concerns from council as possible and try to bring it forward when we think we have, I think just a better public policy if everyone feels like if they have some issues. So I think our challenge is put the ideas out there, you guys get the feedback, try to see how we can address that. I would much rather take a month or two longer to have a 7-0 vote than to rush something just because you got 4 votes and you're like, okay, we're going to run it. And then I think from my perspective is people try to reach out and I don't want, if we aren't successful in doing that, I don't want people to feel like the council's rubber stamping what we're proposing. I just want people to realize there's a lot of work that's happened to make that proposal something the entire council could support. And that I think is Michael's.
I had another value effectiveness. So I'm an engineer. We use metrics, right? We have metrics as our use of that is fine, right? And coming back to what do we present at council meetings, right? Oftentimes the sort of statute required metrics are buried up page 347, and they should be top line, right? I'm not sure we have, you're going to hear later about things that are priorities. I'm not sure any of those priorities have good metrics. And some metrics are expensive, right? You can have a metric that says what fraction of your top 50 intersections have a C or better rating, right? That's a mobility metric. It's expensive to go get every time. You have to go get Thorsten, but I don't know, it's $50,000 or something like that. But we don't use any of that, right? And if the public said to me right now, like on public safety, how are we doing it? I don't have metrics right now that I feel that we consistently top line when we're discussing public safety. And so I don't know exactly how you solve that problem, but I think it's persistent and it's related back to what you presented at council.
What you want to use.
Well, I was going to say, I mean, on the data and effectiveness, I actually wrote that in the what do you want to screen out, of course, making these like just based on data and being it private resources that were very much there. But I think with the data, I think that's kind of a bigger discussion on like how we use the data that we do have, right? It's like we have the dashboard, we have one presentation per year where we go through everything. And then it's not clear to me how that actually translates into our agenda, right? So like when we're setting priorities, is that when we should be looking through the agenda, through the data that we collect? And that's the cadence? Or is it like, with this policy, we actually say this policy is intended to have this effect. And then we actually have a cadence where we review, does this policy do what we thought it was going to do? Because I actually don't think that's a thing that typically ever happens in government. And I think there's some, and the thing is, it's that takes a lot of resources. So I know the state of California did something like this, on housing. They're like, okay, we'll pass this policy and then we'll go back a year later and see if it did what we thought it would. And if it doesn't, then say we should say there are a few things. But I don't think we really have that as like a small thing. And I also know, doing that type of stuff does take a lot of resources. So I don't want to, that is like, your effectiveness goes down and spending all your time doing your progress, not, I just need to let things. But I think it's definitely an area that I think we still have to grasp the neck, because I think we're doing a decent job of collecting data. We have the dashboard. I personally have, I think some of the metrics that we collect should be different. I actually never got a good answer to how would we think about changing some of the metrics that we select to be more informative to what we're doing. But I think it's issue. Yeah. Anyway.
Well, but as the council should say, for you at least every year, Dale, 4 years, 3 years, every spring, we come to the council in a meeting like this, we present the data, you say, is this giving you the information you want? How does it inform budget? And I think what's the date of the next meeting this spring? So I think if we haven't meeting already, even May, which we'll do is share the data that we've collected and get confirmation from you. It's meaningful. That will help. That's the first step of informing the 27-28 budget process. So, as we get closer to that, maybe we talk about how to make that as meaningful as possible.
Yeah.
But
I think it's kind of like the council new business request process. Sure, we have a way that we've been doing it, but I'm not sure it's been effective toward our goals. And so the idea of do we, rather than having it in one meeting and talking about that, do we bring it into different sets of policy discussions, but then also have a cycle back for have they been effective? And so I think there's maybe a conversation about how are we using this and is it effective?
Today we talk about priorities, and we want to talk about what does that look like? What does success look like? That starts to point you in a direction on how do you measure and quantify success. Using that conversation and then looking into May, it sounds like at the data that you have available, to be able to look through that lens and what else might you need to know or what different bits of information might be helpful.
Sure.
I was going to say, but it's not just about reviewing the whole dashboard once a year. I think to Councilmember Mark's earlier point about, setting the context. I think for every policy decision, right, it should tie back to, oh, here is the item that's aimed to address. The problem is, we have this data point that says X, and sometimes things come up that aren't necessarily in the data, right? Like the e-motorcycle, that's not something we're collecting data on, but it's something we've heard a lot of communities. So I think that being able to, in every policy decision, saying, hey, here's items like the data that leads us to conclude that this is an issue that needs to be addressed. That's all I think would be really helpful, the context setting, both, for council lines.
I think that's the question of how do you use the data, right? So, the cadence, as you mentioned, but also the opportunities for engaging with data.
I think this one's really important. So you can control the temperature in your house by a valve on your furnace, right? Adjusting how much natural gas or electricity is going into your furnace. Or you can have a thermostat that measures the temperature and automatically calibrates that signal based on the actual temperature curve, right? The first thing is called running open loop, and the second thing is called running closed loop, right? We don't run closed loop on our policy by and large. We don't say, all right, here's the policies we did last year, which ones worked, and here's the data. Now, I don't know if you can do that with everything, but we need to do it on some things. And the things that we prioritize here today, we need to do it on those.
Well, and I think the effectiveness thing's important, but so if land use gets changed in the valley floor, there should be a change in the amount of building permits that are applied for by the end of 2027. There's not. Clearly, everything we did didn't work out to the point what the goal was. And so I think there are very specific examples of things where I think it's a really good idea to say, we do the policy, we're going to measure it at the end of 27, and we're going to say, this is how many permits are in the pipeline. If it hasn't gone up, then find out, what did we get wrong, sort of thing.
Well, and starting with one of the priorities of council is a place to start. You can look at, you can have a desire for data in all directions, but starting there and make sure they have the right metrics. All right. Well, in the interest of keeping us moving, the question that was at the bottom there, and Ryan referred to a little bit, was, what do you want this council to be known for? What do you want to be known for when you look back or, in the voices of the community?
I'm reiterate the one we just heard.
Yeah.
Effective.
Yeah.
Just
Progress.
but it doesn't mean you don't. You still have strategic plans and things like that, but at the end of the day, a strategic plan is just a plan. I think you have to really. I would love to see this council be known for the effectiveness, and I guess having that sort of sense of urgency of which is hard to find in any government. That sense of urgency driven towards actual outcomes.
Subject.
I'm trying to figure out how to say this, but accessible, because I feel like there's a lot of distrust of government as a whole, and I would love this government that people feel the over there are crazy, but here our government helps. Our government is good for us. Our government is accessible and it's helpful. This is quality because yes, look at that. To be honest, I have that kind of connection to our community that they go with. Everything else might be crazy, but here it's done.
Right. Yeah. It's homemade.
Yeah.
I can feel safer. Yeah.
And you can do that not only by being accessible, but by being effective.
Yes.
Yep.
Because if you are somebody who listens and, hears everything and they can get in touch with you, if you don't do that, then you're not instead effective.
To build on Paul's point, I think I'd like our council to be known in the sense that every person that lives here, regardless of race, gender, citizenship status, can point to one or two things that the council did that helped make their life better the past year. Whether that's a new crosswalk or a stoplight, or you funded some additional money for staffing days to help make the festival better. Everyone should be able to point to one or two things made their life better. We did it. Okay, that's happening.
What is talking about?
Okay, some tangible results too.
Something that's some things for people to be aware of that I think we do going like the social media aspects like that. It's that, and, you know, presuming that we are effective and we get things done is how to get that out to the community, because in my case, good government is often invisible. People don't realize things are working, like what went into things working if it's working. And so how we translate that and broadcast that to the community is like important in all the audience that they're free game. That's Autumn's problem.
Well, I would say it is actually also, you know, everyone's problem, right? Like seeing how there's some, you know, local election officials in the country who are amazing at social media, you know? Like I saw a video of how the dump trucks in New York were being repurposed as snowplows, and they were out there like explaining all that. And that's, you see that and you're like, oh, our city government is like being creative and doing things to make their lives better so that, you know, there are like snowdrifts everywhere. I think to the extent that we can kind of communicate more of that, because honestly, a lot of people are just going to be on social media. I think figuring out the effective use of social media to, you know, help with the great things that we're doing. Storytelling. Yeah, and storytelling, I think, is important because also, you know, with social media, obviously we don't want to be out there like thinking the arguments situations, but, you know, some of the good things, like showing that on social media and people will see it and go, oh, that's great. You know, City Issaquah government doing all these great things. I think that is honestly like most people aren't going to know most of the things that we do, right? Like if you're the average member of college, you're not going to hear about changes with pedal sheeting or something or what have you. I think most people, you know, it's like, oh, they want to see things in a build world that I'm like, oh yeah, it was a new park on the trail, like all those types of things. Yeah,
Help me connect the dots, right? Between the work that you're all doing and the city is doing with the lives of people in your community. Helping them to see the relationship.
On that point, I think the city has done pretty not working out for stop.
Sorry.
We're so glad it's working.
I think the city has done a good job. There's always room to improve, but I mean, communicating the kind of happy fun stuff that the city does, that gets communicated well. I'm on things that are more contentious. I think those are harder, and this is where you don't want individual council members again arguing with public, because when does that go well? But you know, that would be a good aspirational goal to figure out how the city or someone, I'm not sure who that is exactly, is able to, when we have contentious discussions that get out there, most people are, I mean, we can either completely cede the public forums next door, or we could try to find some way to constructively have someone or some entity try to engage in contentious things as well.
No, that's a good. I mean, I would say obviously we got a lot of negative stuff on having the immigration gaining hair last weekend. I don't know. I find it hard to figure out because sometimes I feel like engaging with some of the people upset about that. I don't know where you're going to end up. I mean, it's just hard. I mean, it's I don't know. It's really tough because I think social media has many great things about it. But I found during my time in the Senate, the people that were most upset, I just said, get their number. I'll call them my drive home tonight, because I found I could not do anything with them via email or text. I had to actually have a human to human conversation. So they felt like they were heard and listened to. And I think for some of the people that are upset with what we're doing, I don't know if we can solve those concerns via social media. I do think direct outreach, I mean, we're a community of 42,000 people is not so overwhelming, I think. And there's not that many people normally that are super pissed off. I think if we discover they're upset via social media, I think my default, I'm just speaking, I guess, off the cuff. I mean, I haven't thought about this, but I would feel comfortable just reach out to them saying, hey, I'm willing to talk to you directly, or if anyone on the council wants to. I think we'll have more traction in our community. And that means if they're bombarding us from somewhere else in the country or somewhere else in the state, like, no, I'm not engaging in that. But if they're in Issaquah, business or resident or anything, I would rather try to get through conflict with direct human interaction rather than social media discussion.
Well, quick response to that. So, first of all, I recognize it's very easy for me to say this is an aspirational goal and not suggest any mechanism to do so. I think you're for a city like Issaquah, I think you're right about the most vocal. I think what would be interesting and useful to focus on would be one level down, where they're not the most vocal, they're not the most angry. It's not the people that are showing up with pitchforks. They're upset. And they're one level of engagement down where they're not necessarily going to get personal outreach because they're not being loud enough. But that's actually going to be a lot more people. So figuring out how to engage with them would be useful if possible.
It's almost a universal truth in figuring out how to reach people that are not actively engaged in the positive or the negative. And so it's a great focus.
I think it becomes how do you get people there Monday night at 7 p.m. or equivalent, because I think social media is designed to bring about discord and unhappiness. I think we're all living in a giant episode of MTV. What was the old show? Real World. Yeah. We're all living, and the producers have decided to make it as unpleasant and fractious as possible.
That's more like Big Brother.
Causes us to get that was that Big Brother.
Like Big Brother.
Yeah. I don't know.
Traditional. Yeah.
The last one I watched was Real World like 30 years ago, so I don't know any of those other ones you're talking about. But you know, it's really designed to bring out discord and people acting horribly and in ways that they would be embarrassed to say. They say things that they would be embarrassed to say in front of their parents or grandparents. And so I don't find those forums generally conducive. I don't generally come away from those forums with a better idea of how to do governance. But how do you get people like that thing? Mondays at 7 p.m. is a big deal, right? I was on council when that kid was killed on Newport, and we spent 6 months hearing from the community about how we killed that kid. And my job was to sit there and listen and take it, right? And so I'm not saying everybody needs to physically come in at 7 p.m. on Monday nights, but that thing where people can come to the council is, to me, the closest thing that I would call sacred. Like, we have to be there. We have to do it. We have to hear people. We have to listen to people. We don't necessarily have to do what they want us to do. But I just get really nervous about social media because it is such it is a feature that it causes everybody to be angry every single time they go on it. And I know people who don't engage in it in the same way that there's an equity issue because there's people who don't have access to computers. There's people who have decided they're not going to do social media because life is too short. So how do you get people involved in the structured conversations where all 8 of us elected officials hear them at the same time?
Well, so I think we could probably talk about social media and the highs and lows associated with that for the rest of our time together, because there are so many important and significant touch points and influences of that world. But if we're comfortable, I think that the important message here is continue to pursue transparency and find ways to engage at your council meetings via social media and the factors, but also perhaps other ways that
Rajang mentioned you could do the copy things.
Right.
That could be something that you guys could do on your own, or you could have a more structured thing where everyone does.
Maybe that's a good bike rack thing too. You know, the council's done different things like that over the past several years.
Yeah.
This council needs to decide what you want to do.
Yeah, what our public engagement looks like, because we have tried multiple things. So
I think the ultimate challenge that we have is council meetings. Like, I think it's like we're presenting information. You as a governing body are voting on those things. Like, it's not a dialogue of us arguing and stuff back and forth. We want to hear from the community, but it's been very clear this is not the place for us to have a back and forth argument. But then the question becomes, where is that place? Is it online? Is it in person? Like, because if you don't create it, maybe bad things happen. And so I don't know the answer to that. But at this point, I will admit that I think that criticism of our process is valid. There is no forum for us to kind of have this back and forth. And I don't know how you fix that, but it's worth doodling on.
All right. Yeah. This is different strategies.
The council meetings, I really want them to be like, we're doing business. Like, we're going to present information. The council is going to vote on the information, and then things will become law. or not become law. And that's the reality of it.
Well, the other piece to those, the committee of the whole. You all have to decide what that looks like. I think in part, the committee of the whole was an opportunity for people to come and talk about issues. So you all need to figure out how best to use the committee of the whole.
I will say that on services and safety, I always let a certain amount of back and forth with the public occur, right? If Connie or Steve or anybody else wanted to come in and ask a question, I would usually reframe that question back to staff if it was a good question. And so there was some of that back and forth, but we've never done it at committee as a whole, right? We've allowed input, but the same way we allow input at regular council meetings.
Also about engaging the other 38,000 people.
Right. We don't have the time to come in because it's not great. Yeah.
Okay, great conversation. All right, so I want to make sure anybody who has additional comments around what you want to be known for, if we can capture those. Yeah, good.
Stewardship. So we write laws and we write checks, which is a nice way of saying we take people's money and we take their freedom. So the question is, that is a big, important job. And I always feel like people like taxes. Nobody loves paying taxes. People pay taxes. They are enthusiastic to pay taxes on the things they care about, and they are unenthusiastic to pay taxes they're not enthusiastic about. So that stewardship is, if somebody comes up to me and says, Councilmember Martz, you voted for a tax thing, shame on you, right? You supported the school district's levy, shame on you, right? As a stewardship means that you can look them in the eye and say, yes, I did, and here's why. And the subtext on that is, and if you want to vote me out next time, vote me out, right? My hope is that people take a look at the sum of your work over the course of your term, if you choose to run again, and decide how they think you did, because you made some tough decisions. But that stewardship is the thing. And how do we, and some of that comes back to metrics, and some of that comes back to how do you engage the public, right? But we have to be able to, people need to be able to come up to us in the grocery store or at church or at the park and say, I think you made a bad decision. And we have to be able to say, here's why I made that decision.
Is that slide still in the rules one?
Rules, yeah, it should be next,
Yeah.
but updated.
There are two rules. Yeah. So this was the one we were trying to find earlier. And I don't want to go down a big path because I'm conscientious of the time here, but you touched on a lot of these things. And I think your comments, bring us back to that stewardship, trustee steward, right? And so again, these are the different hats that you wear collectively, all of them, right? And so there are times where you're leaning perhaps in one or the other direction, but to be aware that you're setting strategic direction, right? As a governing body, you are the trustee, you are the stewards for the longer horizon to look at where the city has been, where it is going, and to be able to make sure that there's the throughput there. Representative, of course, representing the voices of your constituents and residents of the community. How you do that, matters. Being a community builder, you're also bringing people together. That's part of the really decision maker. Sometimes that's not easy. Sometimes that's hard. Having good information and data, as we've been talking about, obviously is an asset to be well and general oversight. And so these are the 6 roles that you need to keep in view and think about how they show up in the conversations you have. And typically, you'll have certain members of the body that might lean towards be really focused on stewardship, right? Bless you. And that's really I got to make sure we stay the course and we're moving forward. Others might be really focused on building community, bringing people together. That's great. But understanding the different roles that you're performing can be. So we provide some additional information in our report on this if that's helpful too. Lots of information, lots of directions we can go, but I thought it might be helpful to just bring it to the room. Okay, so I am looking at the time because I want to make sure we have adequate time for our priority conversation. And the next slide we had was, we talked about a bunch of this. I think we touched on it in a lot of ways, but I want to ask the question in an intentional way around kind of expectations of each other, interactions with the mayor administration. And so we talked about some of the norms, some of information flow, transparency, these sorts of things, and would capture that. But is there, with each of these, let's ask the question if there's anything we haven't touched on already. So what type of relationship do you hope to have within council with your colleagues. Yeah, this is part of the how do you show up for each other. Earlier it was mentioned, and this I think probably goes both ways around the surprises, right? So you get attention, having difficult conversations, bringing information into the room. These were some of the themes I think that touched on there. Is there anything additional that you were thinking of ahead of our meeting that we want to bring into the room to make it? So first of all, the relationship among council members.
Politics is seen as a competitive sport where you're battling inside the arena as gladiators. I would hope that when we're asking questions of, if I ask Paul about his position on, crosswalks or whatever it is, he would see it as an opportunity to learn and gain understanding between the two of us and not as a challenge to him. I'm just trying to find the best policy that we can going forward and understand where he's coming from and try to learn from what he might be bringing to the conversation. And I hope that we could bring that collegiality to our relationships.
Right. That's a spirit of curiosity, right? And then you're like, tell me more. Tell me.
Assuming good intentions.
Yeah, I think that's a really important foundational perspective, and that allows you to have difficult conversations if you're really authentically showing up, knowing that people want what's best for the community.
That was like a Senate rule: don't impugn the motives of others, because nothing good can happen in public discourse if you're impugning the motives of others. Because I can definitely say, having interacted with all of the members of the council, everyone's here for the right reasons. Everybody's here for the right reasons. And I think my hope is, I feel like I've gotten to know everyone, but my hope is that the people on the council that don't know other people on the council as well, sorry, Paul, you're new, but it's just try to do outreach. So for the people that you're not as connected with, because I think it will benefit the community of Issaquah.
Yeah.
For that outreach to occur.
Yeah. Stay curious. I think just stay curious and get to work. That's that.
I mean, the acid test will be when we have a 4-3 or a 5-2 vote on something that people feel absolutely passionately. And if you're on the losing side of that, there will come a day where you will feel like, I want to quit. Like, I'm so mad about this issue. I feel so passionately about it. I wonder if I should quit. I mean, in 17 years, I have felt that a few times and soldiered on. My exemplar in all this, and forgive me, several of you have heard this before, is we had a debate one evening and Councilmember Ray chose to mention, how this current topic related to another decision that we made previously, how that was a bad decision. Well, you can't do that in Robert's rules. You can't re-adjudicate a resolved issue. And I point of ordered it. And I said, point of order, that's a settled issue. And Chris said, you're right, I'm sorry, we'll move on. And that was the finest moment of collegiality I've ever experienced in 17 years on council. So we will have moments like that. So we're just going to have to figure it out. And my hope is that when those moments arrive, the 8 of us and the staff that support us have the rapport that we can settle the butterflies, gird ourselves, and move on.
And then when we do have those 4-3 votes, not undermine that and take it and accept that that is the will of the body, and that's how we move forward.
Yep. And trust that there will be other days and other close votes that will go your way on things you care about.
Exactly. Today, I just have to go with the body, understand the will of the majority. But you're right. Yeah, it's what happens when you don't get the policy that you had hoped for, but also what happens when you do. Like if you are in the fourth grade, how do you approach that also is equally important.
Don't run down the sideline taunting those ATS players.
No Rick Wallens.
Exactly.
Yep. Well, I really liked how Russell started out the idea of, politics is often about what can I get from you and, one up everything. And so similarly, I like to think of learning from my colleagues as an abundance mindset rather than scarcity. Oftentimes when you're sitting there trying to make votes in, adjust policy, it feels like, oh, it's only a few things. And so that real scarcity mindset. But the idea that, I can come away with something and it creates more nuance. We can grow the pie with the abundance of working together because we're all coming from different perspectives that can ultimately make things better as a whole.
Yeah, which is great. I mean, yeah, when you bringing and be able to take advantage of all of the lived experience.
And part of it is focusing on the big picture. I'll tell you about a time early in being on the council. Mark and I were both proponents of a bill that the plastic bag ban. And we had a council member that we were with whose support we wanted, and they had been supportive of environmental policies previously, and they had really gone out on a limb. And we got together with them, and they just said, I need these 3 things, or I'm not going to support it. And, you know, we sort of hammered through, and he said, well, like, we can give you these 2, but like this 3rd thing's going to be really impossible. And they were just like, well, I'm not supporting it. I'm like, but you know it's a good policy, and you know that the city would be better off with it than without it. And they were just like, no. So that got too transactional and too far away from like, where's the city today? Where could the city be tomorrow? And I proudly, every time I'm at the grocery store, and you know, if a clerk mentions about, oh, you got to do this bag thing, I'm like, I supported it. I support it today. It was the right decision then. It was the right decision now. So there's some of that in there too, right? Staying focused on like, how do we make the city better? And, you know, there is some of that. If you support this, I'll support this. But we don't do, you know, we don't. If the public thinks that there's a lot of smoky backroom politics, there just isn't. So keeping a focus on where's the city today, where could the city be tomorrow, solves a lot of that.
Less transactional bartering, more developing better policy together.
My goal is not to have, when I had committees I chaired that had unanimous votes at a committee on everything the entire session. So my goal is to do what Tola just said, and you go out and you find out what it is that people need to have changed or added to the policy. I would rather have a policy with broader support and work harder to get it. I'm not saying it's harder to get that broader support, but I think I view my role in this process is to get as much consensus from the council as possible on everything that comes in front of a committee agenda or council agenda. And I'm committed to doing that. I mean, I've seen too many split votes where it just ends up not being public policy with the most buy-in. And so my goal is to try to do more work to build more consensus amongst this group.
If I can comment on accept the will of the body. So some of us have jobs where we're council members and then we're lobbying for policy somewhere else. So I'll just say that the last Thursday,
job.
So last Thursday, I had a meeting with Callan, our representative, and I was talking about things for my job with my job hat on, and they didn't conflict with anything that we have decided here, but I could see a situation where that may happen. And so I'm just saying, don't impugn, as was said before, don't impugn negative motives on the part of the person. Please ask what hat I was wearing when I'm saying those things, or I need to ask what hat Tola might be wearing for, cloud computing or science or whatever you might be doing, as opposed to imputing motives. And just throw that out there for people to just keep in mind.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. And y'all, the second question, which is kind of in response maybe to next, are there things that you're looking for in that relationship interaction with the mayor and administration?
You're one phone call away, which is great. Have a conversation to ask how and what's the long range implication for what we're thinking about doing. So good, appreciate that.
I have one on the high performing council side of things. Information equity. I don't have anything that I'm specifically saying, but this is a thing that I think can help organizations do better, is if we are serious with that. If there's something that you think is important, that we all know about it, or none of us knows about it, and there's discretion that will be required. I understand that sometimes it should be done. But if it's one, it should probably be all.
Yeah, that's fair.
I think Wally does a great job of that.
And that's exactly what I was going to say, is coming into this, I feel like Wally has done a really good job doing the outreach to each of us to make sure that we at least have access to the information, or in some cases chasing us down if he really feels like we need to have the information.
I'm talking to you, the Cancun airport.
I know. yeah, that it was a good example of things. So I love that you are accessible to us and that you feel like you want to hear from us. It does leave a little question about what information do some council members have that others don't, and how are we developing that relationship cohesively along or across everybody? And so just something we'll have to kind of think about and figure out how we negotiate everything.
People know I try to be a fairly open book. And I think, I don't know what you and Bart have been doing after the weekly meetings in terms of sharing.
Well, we've only had one.
I know, but yeah.
But
It's
yeah, I mean, it does raise a question, which is, how do we populate information from the leadership? And how do we do it in an OPMA compliant way? And we haven't really completely figured that out. We have some ideas on that, right?
Well, I mean,
an open public meetings act,
probably the biggest key to failure for a council, check me on this, is what one knows they all know. If you don't do that, that is probably the single greatest key to failure.
Undermining.
You agree? I mean, and so you may not realize it, but we're religious about it. Absolutely, positively religious. I am learning that because he talks so much with each of you individually, I have to catch up. Sometimes if he shares a piece of information with one of you, then I make a point when I see you next to share it with all of you. Maybe just transactional, not a big deal. But if it's anything of any consequence, you have my sworn obligation that you're going to hear it. So that, and the staff that's here too, I think knows that we live by that. It is if it's not the very top rule, it's up there. So don't ever think that there's things going on that you don't know. And the reason I communicate so much with all of you is just to make sure nothing slipped through a crack, because occasionally something will slip through a crack. You haven't seen an email because you're busy living your life. But that's a top list thing. Because if you don't do it, it's the surest way to failure.
100%.
Do you do that with the Wednesday meetings too? Because I have felt like ever since we stopped having the round robin third council member, those leadership and again, we've had one staff meeting since I've been back.
I think we're just trying to bring that back. So
that has felt like a black box to me. Like I felt like I didn't know at all what was going on in those meetings.
And I'll work to folks that were there too. Not every meeting has things that are worth sharing because they're really transactional. Sure. So, we've tried in the last few years to use these settings for all the big talks. And so the council leadership meetings are really a bit more, okay, how are we going to schedule it out? Because, you do all complain the meetings get long sometimes. And so we spent others of your colleagues.
That's in every rule.
It's one of my mayor goals. Sure.
So I don't think that there's been what's happened in leadership has not been anything magical. And so I share, cadence and direction.
And there have been some times during leadership where I'd be like, hey, this sounds like an issue that council needs to know about it. Wally, will you be, our conduit? And you've done outreach.
But it's once every couple months.
Exactly.
I can see, to Lindsay's point, I can already see like a flaw just from this first month where I discovered there's a park levy that is going to expire at the end of the year. I think it makes sense to renew it. So I've worked with Jeff on what that would look like, but I realized I haven't literally sent that out. I think I've had random one-off meetings with people where I mentioned that because I'm trying to be open and transparent. But to your point, I probably haven't sent out that.
Yeah.
Everybody.
And how does something like that become, okay, you've discovered something you think is important, you're starting to work with staff. When does council come into that conversation? Does it happen through the annual work plan?
Well, it happens in the next hour.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
But what about things that come up, next month, and then we don't have another retreat to surface those things?
And that's what I think. This is valid. I think I have to, Mr. Wally's point, I'm doing every meeting that's asked of me, I'm doing like as quick as people can have the meeting happen. And so I'm happy to do summaries, I guess, after those meetings. Hey, I met this.
Well, I also think that it's somewhat on Council President DiMichele and I think we've been trying to have a conversation about how do we have regular engagement with the other 5 council members that do not attend that meeting in an OPMA compliant way, right? And I think there's room for us.
There's no OPMA violation for them just sending out a summary email from that, or we could even create the summary email to share.
Usually that goes through.
Yeah. And so I think that would be, to me, a great idea.
But there was a time where council leadership had regularly scheduled meetings. The council president and deputy president regularly met with the other 5 council members, right? I'm not necessarily suggesting that's what we should be doing, but I'm just saying that there's room, I'm not just saying you people need to do this or you people need to do that. Council president and I should.
And we have to remember, Open Public Meetings Act, you can be in the same room together. You just cannot be discussing things that are going to be like, germane to that.
Well, I think this is a good conversation. I think that making sure awareness and shared information is important. It's also an art. Like, you're really always working on it to make sure and find ways to feel informed. Timing sometimes factors in. Like, there are lots of things to keep in view, but the commitment to making sure that you all have the information that you need to stay abreast of emerging issues or questions that are emerging is important. And you've heard the commitment to doing that, and test driving different ways can be.
And just to close, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I do think there is still some of that question of you're going to have to negotiate for yourself when something like a parks levy comes up and you're like, oh, I want to move on that. How much do you have the ability to just do it?
No, I don't think I have. It all comes from the council. I think it's just a question of, I think right now it's like, hey, Jeff, what could we do?
Yes.
What does your guys' kind of Parks Board universe look like of projects? And then how do we share that with the council? And so I think we're working on that. To Wally's point, I think the thought was we could discuss it while we're here. But I think to close, because I think I made the comment about trying to be unanimous on the votes. But I will also say, like in the 22 session, we had a bill around state workers being able to collectively bargain. We had 28 votes for the bill. So it was a 28-21 vote. Like, we did not need any Republican votes. And I intentionally delayed the vote for a week to let all the Republicans, even though they were very clear, they're not voting for the bill. I said, you're going to be impacted because your staff falls under this. I want to know what your feedback is. And we put the feedback in the bill and they voted against it, but it ended up being better public policy. So I think people on this council should know, even if you're against something, it does not preclude your input being factored in. And just because we take that input doesn't mean you have to switch your vote. I think it is something that I think just generates better public policy. And so, and to Tola's point, I think on the bag issue, I think it was better in the end, just even if it was small changes and it didn't change the vote, like at least I think people feel like they're being listened to and heard. And that's my goal for this council, is every member to feel like they're being listened to and heard from the administration. And even if it doesn't change their vote, it doesn't mean their input's being disregarded. And I'm committed to doing that. I think it's the best way to create broad supported public policy.
Also, the services blind spots you might have otherwise. They address, right? Your comment? All right.
Sure.
I think we should take a break. We good with that? I don't want to leave anything hanging if you are like, but I just wanted to say the one thing. All right, let's take a break. It's 11:15 now.
That's 12. Well, no, 11. You're right.
Not 12. Or gosh, now you're going to make
Good time.
like we still have lots to do. So we're going to take a short break, stretch, get your circulation going. When we come back, we're going to start talking about priorities. And so I want to make sure there's lots of time to really talk about what these mean for you. So we come back at the bottom of the hour, 11:30. We give you someone like a relatively clear day on Saturday, the rest of the day. So before we have lunch, I'm going to share with you the priority themes that I heard in our conversation, so we can get them into the room, and really want to start off there. Have I missed anything? I'll share context and have some conversation on those, just to make sure that we're sort of naming what I call big rocks, right? What are the big things? We'll have the mayor also share kind of some of his priorities, how that fits in with the council priorities, just for openness. So you spot there, that's your heads up. And so we'll have that conversation, kind of get them roughly defined around what we're talking about. Then after lunch, we want to talk specifically about the big important priorities, the things that are most important to you all for the next year. What does success look like? What does that mean? What translates into a work life? What are the things you want to actionize? Actionize? Is that a word? It's not. For the next year. And so I think if we can sort of frame the conversation and get agreement on what are the big rocks, maybe even without the conversation behind them before lunch, then we'll come back. And so I'm trying to keep our pacing kind of flowing, and that's that.
So just to make sure I understand, you want to go through what the big topics are, but not dive deep on individual ones, and we'll come back to the big topics?
Exactly. That's right. Yeah. So I definitely want to have the conversation on the big ones, but I want to make sure that we're talking about the right things. And so that's why I want to frame it up first. So yes, that's my hope. So we will come back. So I guess the temptation will be to want to go deep into the early topics. And I'm just saying, let's keep it up here first, and then we'll go through each. Okay. All right. So there we go. Strategic alignment and council priorities. That's what we're shifting gears. So, and you'll be successful because of all the things we talked about already today, right? That's the biggest. All right. So here are the themes. And so shared priorities. So this is where multiple people brought them up. Let me share a little bit about what I've heard and what this means, just to provide some context to that. So housing affordability, and don't get into the wording, we'll talk about that. I think everybody mentioned that in some shape or fashion. This is something that's really important to a lot of you on council. And this looks in different ways. Yeah, this is looking at land use code. This is looking at the time it takes to get through the permit process. There's a lot of dimensions to this, but the focus is how do we increase housing stock and address housing affordability, but all levels. And so that's the plenty. Definitely had the most energy, I would say, in the conversations that I had. The next one, transportation mobility. I heard this as important and critical, but also a longer term plan. That there's an acknowledgement and a concern around traffic and some output that happens every day through Issaquah. And there are some great opportunities on the horizon with light rail and other things. That's a longer play. What I would say then between those two, the intersection is around transit-oriented development. And so touches a little bit on both the housing affordability focus and also transportation mobility. So it sort of, I think, touches in both of those areas. I heard from some the importance of the budget, keeping an eye on that, being those fiscal stewards and recognizing that there may be some uncertainty on the horizon. So being alert to the budget, not losing sight of that. Public facilities. This one was specifically around City Hall and the police station I'd heard about. But infrastructure projects generally might fall into that conversation. I don't want to be limiting, but I've heard more around public facilities and Utspeed there. And then the last two, parks and open space, public safety, as well as emergency management. I heard we do this really well. We're really proud of these things. You don't want to lose that. And so I didn't hear those as we need to do something dramatically different, but we don't want to let it fall back. Like, we want to keep a focus on those because they matter and they contribute to quality of life in our community. So those were the themes that stood out to me. Now, there may be things that I have either misrepresented or they are in addition to that. And so this is where I wanted to start. So what's missing or framing that would be helpful to the conversation? Comments?
I will ask my fellow council members and mayor, jobs. Do we care about jobs? Because one of the reason that 6,000 cars a day leave in the morning is because all the jobs are in, every job I've ever had when I've lived in 20 plus years living here has been in Bothell, Bellevue, or Trenton. And they've never been in Issaquah. And I feel like jobs also relates to these, but if I'm the only one, that's fine.
I would say, I think the whole, figuring out economic development is a big challenge, because I think in terms of jobs, right, like now that we're moving more toward just like societally, there's more of like hybrid stuff. We also don't like, for like regional mobility, honestly, most people that live in Issaquah aren't gonna work in Issaquah, or if they work in Issaquah now, maybe they'll like take a different job somewhere else. And it's not realistic to really expect that, you know, a new employer in Issaquah is gonna only be for Issaquah folks. We've tried that, you know, with like, I mean, with Highlands and Taos, there's this whole concept like, oh, there will be a Microsoft office here, and those all kind of fell through. So I think, you know, bringing in new major employers, I think is good for like the tax base and those types of things. I think also on business, I know there's like, I think economic development is something that just broadly, you know, I think one thing that's probably missing in here is like small business and how do we support that, right? Like we talk a lot about permitting for housing, but to me, the bigger issue that people see and like my friends complain about is, oh my God, it takes so long for all these small businesses to open. Like what's wrong with the city's permitting process? And so I think that's something that, you know, could be.
Yeah, I would definitely, in principle, if somebody was able to figure out a way to bring in a large employer that would have a good benefit to the community, I think that would be great. I'm not sure it's not my personal priority, but I will say that I think it could dovetail very nicely with housing affordability as a topic, as just like Kelly said, and on the permitting side of things, and making sure that in the same ways we want to make sure we don't have things that we know are counterproductive from a housing affordability standpoint on the permitting side of things, that we don't have things that are counterproductive from an economic development perspective on the permitting side of things. And many of those things could go hand in hand. And I think that's where we might be able to kind of define agreement on things that are jobs related.
It almost seems like not to have to cluster them, but yeah, there's that whole idea at sort of in Issaquah economic vitality, meaning jobs, housing, you know, mobility, like these pieces all fit together, and land use choices, permitting process, they all sort of contribute in that. So maybe that's the lens to bring this. We don't have to. I want to make sure this talks up. So.
Well, I think I will add just on the economic development side, I think I have a very clear idea what the role of our emergency management team is and what the goal and the point of our parks team and our public facilities team. I think there are many ways that you can use an economic development staff, and I don't think we've necessarily been very clear about what that is, because it could be focused on bring in the big businesses. It could be entirely focused on support our small businesses. You know, there's a lot of aspects there. And I think at some point we should decide what that is and what we want to get out of that. I'm not sure I would say it's necessarily my priority for 2026. But I think it's an open question out there.
All right, thank you. You've answered my question.
I'd agree with Tola, though, that it should be a priority. I mean, you look at all the people that have been laid off, Amazon and Microsoft, and we'd like them to stay in the community. We'd like them to be here, but we need to create opportunities for them to stay here. Otherwise, they'll be moving away. I think there's an opportunity as well with the Seattle head tax. You know, that policy choice by Seattle resulted in many jobs going to Bellevue and many jobs going to Redmond, right? If the head tax gets passed on a state level, right, what are we going to do here in town to keep the jobs here so they do not leave, just the jobs that we have so they do not leave? What can we do from a policy point of view to make the tax impact something that doesn't result in jobs leaving our city? And I don't know how the legislature is going to go on that. But if I were a betting person, I'd say they're going to pass a head tax because $1.3 billion is too big of a hole for them to do other things. No one was talking about, when I was down in Olympia, no one was talking about cutting any programs. No one was talking about doing anything that's fiscally responsible. So, you know, I think that the tax is coming. How do we want to be prepared to take advantage of it? I think is an opportunity, a discussion we need to have.
Well, thank you. Good point. So So the focus on jobs and forecasting, potential contributing factors as to where people are going to be, what they're going to do, as important. And the housing affordability perhaps is part of that equation too, right? For people to be able to stay.
I guess from my perspective, if we're really talking about attracting business, I think that goes into the kind of fiscal sustainability bucket, right? Like every local government is facing a structural deficit. So how can we attract more, jobs, more development, more investment in our city so that we actually have, the ability to have the revenues to do all the things that people in our community expect, police, fire, parks and open space, services, all the other great things that we do. We need to make sure that, we're continually making sure we have the economic activity in our city that's growing. Otherwise, if that's not happening, then the only way you can get more revenues by increasing taxes on people that are already here, which have the effect of, potentially driving folks out. And that's probably the opposite of what we want. And so I think, the attracting business and stuff, I think should fall under the fiscal sustainability category of, how do we be fiscally sustainable in the long term?
That's where I was going to go with things. When I talk about our problems with the budget, the terminology fiscal sustainability to me suggests a scarcity mindset and suggests that the only way that we can be sustainable is through cuts and cuts and cuts. And I think we haven't yet approached the idea of growing the pie and what that would look like for us. If, is there a benefit to streamlining permitting and economic development and bringing in jobs of growing our revenue streams? And how would we go about doing that? Is that something that we would want to pursue to address some of our budget issues, given the limitations that we have from the state level? And so I would be interested in having that conversation when it comes to budget, not just how can we make sure we are cutting to stay within what we currently have.
But it's interesting too. People respond to words in different ways. So I appreciate you bringing that up because sustainability could be defined in so many ways. But if it means something specific, then it's reduction. Then that's important to get the.
I mean, one way to think about this issue is we have not had a jobs-focused development agreement in at least a decade. Right? We've had a lot of housing-related development agreements. We've had some development agreements that have retail aspects to them. But I mean, Costco was the last jobs-related development agreement, right? And you could argue, I guess, the Rowley one is also somewhat jobs-related, but it's been a long time, right? And if we talk about strategic relationships with potential companies to come here to help, because every living wage job that we provide is one less car on the freeway every morning, or one less seat on a bus. But
I think in the transportation, there's a connection. I think like when light rail committed to Bellevue, the Spring District, kind of blew up with people I think are willing to make it their global headquarters if they know. So I think there is a connection to the transportation piece of light rail coming to Issaquah and Deputy President Mart's goal of having more jobs in Issaquah. Because I do think if we can pull the rabbit out of the hat on Sound Transit, I think we open the floodgates to the kind of investments you want to see of large employers who are willing to locate here, because like your example is they could live on Lake Sammamish, have a 5-minute drive into work. Their employees could be commuting from anywhere on the network. Like there's a lot of really cool opportunities, I think. So I think if it's added on the list, it's helpful. And the only other one, and I don't know, I can give examples later on, because a list that we came out with, I think, for the administration side, the only one that's not on there is this customer service mentality of city staff. And it's something I just want to throw out as something, because it would kind of overlap kind of the administration goals. Like I'll give somebody complained that utility bills, there used to be a number on the top of the bar graph saying, this is how many CCFs you use. And then we switched vendors, that went away. And when they complained about it, our first response was, we switched vendors, sorry. And the second response was, let us ask the new vendor if they can put the little number on the top of the bar graph. And so I think our goal, is just having our first response be that second response. Like we're really trying to make our first response of every time it's a C-click fix or whatever it is, our first response, we want to be, let us see what we can do. And we're trying to avoid and kind of retrain staff into saying, we can't do that, and just say, let us look into this and we'll get back to you with potential solutions. And I think, because I do think that is a free improvement, because we're not talking about hiring new staff or creating a new agency. We're just talking about changing the culture of, as we get feedback from our residents, of how we respond to that feedback.
There we go.
I would love if that was, people are open to putting that on there. Can't leave this time.
There we go.
Know that that's council's priority as so much as that is an effective use of government and directing staff.
Well, it can tie into housing affordability or any of the other job stuff. If we're talking about customer service being one of the things that no customer likes in any situation is having to wait. So I see a tie in there that's obviously aligned with priorities. Now, just on the details on fiscal sustainability, another thing I'd like us to discuss is what our revenue tools are. I know we've had lobbying efforts and our legislative priorities on things that can be done to help with the structural deficit. But I mean, just with the state where it is at the moment, they're in the middle of cutting $8 billion themselves and otherwise trying to plug holes. I don't see it as being a priority. It doesn't seem like it's one of the priorities at the moment. So I think we may have to take this into our own hands and see what those tools are. We have levies that are under consideration. What do those look like? And should we try to utilize those and see what the people are open to paying for, and not losing the things that they've come to take for granted that Issaquah provides. In the future, at some point these curves cross and we won't be able to anymore if we don't do something different or the cavalry doesn't come in. So
The little anti-cavalry.
Yep.
Okay, so this is great. So a couple of things. So first of all, on the economic development, the jobs part. So it sounds like along with kind of the opportunities that are on the horizon relative to the transportation mobility and opportunities, there's a long play there, right? And so keeping it in view and the opportunities that may arise as a result. And so some of these are going to have tactical this year. We need to do these things, and others are like, let's keep an eye on this and keep focused and be opportunistic when we can, right? For perhaps bringing in additional business and pursuing other things. For the financial sustainability components of having some conversation around the full array of how do we make sure that we are truly, we'll call it responsible in how you're moving forward, right? And then the only other thing I wanted to bring into the room that I heard earlier today that may or may not land on here, it may be more of a how, but that focus and the interest around engagement and connecting with the community. And I think it touches a little bit on how with the customer service pieces you're describing, but it sounds like something also that is it's not a dollar thing, but it sounds like there's some agreement that that's important. And so I just bring it back to you as something that I heard this morning.
I just want to say, I don't think the jobs thing is a long-term thing. I think it's a near-term thing.
Okay.
I want to put Mayor Mullet in front of CEOs tomorrow.
Okay.
Like, we have been losing jobs here. We lost Marketing Masters as an example of an aerospace firm that was based here. They rented a property to Rallies. They're a world leader in mounting hardware for aerospace. They're gone. We need more living wage jobs. We can't be a veteran community.
Okay. I guess the longer thank you for clarifying that. And your headline even spoke to that. But in this year, we're going to do that. So thank you for calling that out. In terms of revenue on the back end, and how that economic development investments can come back and help to build the pie. And, sometimes that does take time. So,
Yeah.
But very important clarification. Thank you for that.
I think on the kind of communication and process and all of that standpoint, I think this is one where I'd like clarification from you, Mark, is you're going to do things differently than our previous mayor did. And so figuring out how do you want to message out and have the community conversation around what our needs are for transportation, what our needs are for housing. And I think you've already done a great job of laying out those 2 meetings for us to discuss those and further. But then the next step of how do we take that to the public is going to be a really good thing for us to think about and figure. So
There we go. So we'll kind of pocket that one in that administration side. All right. Anything else that's fundamentally missing from, so jobs, economic development generally? I heard some clarifying comments relative to these, which is helpful. Does it resonate? It's right. Excellent. I had, this is, we hear you. Anything else? Sorry, that's a little much. I just, I'm gonna go back and change it at this point, so.
I think, try to quickly share, I think, kind of off the list of 5. Transportation's the first one. We have, to Councilmember Nichols' point, we have a $2.2 million revenue stream coming in from the point 1 on transportation. The thing I look at is we have to do the trail from the South Lake Sammamish neighborhoods in. That's going to involve bonding, but that cannot start till after all the culvert work we heard about at the last council meeting is wrapping up. So that is the summer of 28. So I think the question is, how do you utilize that to start projects between now and the summer of 28 where you could move the needle? And I think since, and Andrea and I have been working on this with Emily and, John Martin says, our current list of projects is all like mega projects, like $700 million. We're talking about what kind of improvements can you make by doing $10 to $20 million of transportation investments outside of the Lake Sammamish Trail. I think it's really a little bit of everything. I think you have crosswalks you could put in a couple of places. I think you have, a trail section along Newport that we think we could be eligible for a PSRC grant to improve and upgrade that. Part of it's already moving forward. There's a second leg that we think we could try to apply for. I think intelligent transportation system investments in terms of how our lights line up. I think there is like a couple $1 million project. You could do it front and sunset. But at the end of the day, I think it's not just going to be like, here's one project you're going to do that's going to solve Issaquah's transportation problems. And it's going to be like, here's investments in intelligent transportation system improvements of how the lights coordinate with each other in certain areas. And it's hard to do that in SR 900 because of the work on SR 900, we cannot restripe because we don't have the space, but we could lengthen the right turn lane into that community, into Talus, to kind of make it a little easier for them to get out of the misery of that. And so I think my guess is on the 9th, that's sort of roughly what you would hear. I think in the park space, I think, Jeff in the parks group is kind of putting together a rough kind of potential list. If you were to do, is not only, so renewing the parks levy, you basically can bond for $9.5 million. That's our current revenue stream that expires at the end of the year if the city were to renew. We also have $2.5 to $3 million of mitigation money that's been dedicated to park improvements that's also sitting there. And I think on top of that, we have other things we could kind of invest if that was the choice of the council. And I think once again, it's a little of everything. It's like, I think the Ramos trailhead, it would be nice if that was paved and it had a bathroom so people could access it. I think we have the ability to do trails on both Bergsma and Squawk now that we can invest in. I think you have a lot of, we're having this big push for the school district cooperation of a shared use agreement. Part of that push could be about us investing in improvements on school district property like IVE having turf, Dodd having turf. The sand lot behind Grand Ridge could be better utilized, to connect in with those. So I think the vision on parks is kind of coming back to this group with kind of, here's a variety of projects, the Eck House at Confluence with, I think there is looking at, could you make upgrades there? And so that I think will be the parks piece. I think the housing piece, it's very, I don't know, it's a challenge to get things moving on the floor of, Central Issaquah. I think it's been a challenge to understand the mitigation fees involved of, there's a daycare on Locust Street where our impact fees for transportation were $500,000. There is a coffee shop idea, as you enter that lakeside property, at the base there, there's $500,000, like the salon on Newport. Once again, you just have really large impact fees that are basically making it impossible for some of these businesses to open up in our community right now. So I think we have to revisit what that looks like. I think that look, you have to decide if on the infill, I think around, Gilman Boulevard where there's already concrete? Do we want to make it easier for people to redevelop where there's already concrete, or do we want to make it harder to develop there, in which case they're going to be pushed to places that currently have trees? I think our goal is to try to have redevelopment of places we've already paved, but I don't think our current code makes it easy to redevelop on places we've already paved. And so that's a challenge. I think with public safety, another to Kevin Nichols, Councilmember Nichols' point, we have 2.2 million that started coming in as of January 1st. Granted, we have to get certified by the CJTC to be able to actually, spend this money. And so that's our challenge as administration, is to actually get that certification process to the finish line. But I think that creates the ability for us to bond and provide improvements for, our police station. We can't move our police station. As dispatch, it has jail, it has to stay there. So I think our goal is to find a place we can move the people above the police station somewhere else. And the meeting with King County Executive Gurmai on Monday is going to be around King County Courthouse as kind of plan A of where we could potentially maybe buy it from the county so we could move some of the people above the police station over to that area. And so I think that, public safety and the building, the public facilities are kind of overlapping. I think the goal is we want to show the community like this new public safety is being dedicated to improving public safety. I think the challenge you constantly have in Olympia is people, you say you're going to do it for one thing and then you supplant and you move the money elsewhere. So I think our goal as an organization is to try to figure out how we can show the community that this money is staying in noticeable improvements to public safety. And if you want a nugget, like this is, it used to be you called 911 in Issaquah, you went by King County. King County wasn't great. So it might take you 6 or 7 seconds before somebody picked up that could help you because they had to transfer to us. Now, if you call 911 in the Issaquah city limits, you're at our dispatch center. Our response times went from 6 seconds to 2.5 seconds. Like we have some of the quickest 911 response times in the country because it's going directly to our dispatch. There is no middleman anymore. There's a positive story. And I think we heard that, from Councilmember Nichols. How do we share some of the, or somebody was saying, share the positive stories we have. And so I think that's our challenge from our communications department, because in public safety, we have a really recent positive story. And the customer service example, I think I already gave. It's not starting a new department or anything like that. It's really just changing how we interact when people give us feedback, whether they're a resident or a business owner in the community. How do we kind of get everyone in even though we are the definition of a monopoly, you can't do anything. If you need a building permit, you can't get anywhere from us. Like you have no choice. But how do we make that process in a way where people feel like we're acting like a small business that's competing for, a 5-star review based on their service interaction with our city? And that's kind of our goal to lay out. And I think from the administration side, I think a lot of our goals are overlapping with the council priorities. And I think it's my job to figure out the finances of how to make these investments. And that's my background, is in that finance space. And that's what I'm committed to figuring out. And I think it involves bonding some of the new revenue streams that have come online for our community. And it's not getting cheaper to build anything. So I chaired the state construction budget on the Senate. People said, you're wasting money on these things. And I'm like, if we have to build it, waiting to build it later is not saving us any money. Trust me, it's like the cost of construction is higher than the interest rate to borrow money right now. So I think I'm definitely going to be advocating for utilizing, some bonding capacity to make some of these investments now, because there's not going to be this magic pot of money that's going to fall out of the sky. As Councilmember Nichols said, the state's not going to send us $50 million to invest in our community. Like we're going to have to figure out how to create our own opportunities to make these investments.
There we go.
On the, the smaller public works and transportation projects, I'm curious, there's been this, the boardwalk on SR 900 that's been busted for 10 months now, maybe 10. And under the previous administration, there was kind of this approach that's like, that's in WashDOT's right away. It's their job to fix it. Is that going to be the approach that we're going to continue to take? Because right now, WashDOT is very preoccupied with fixing all the highways in the state, and understandably that needs to be where their focus is. And doorbelling in Tallis, people complain about that. They're like, oh, now I can't, and for me living in Tallis, to be able to get onto the East Lake Savannah Trail, now I have to do this weird detour going on sketchy bike lanes.
100%. I think even with Brian, our regional rep on WashDOT,
okay,
it's very clear they're going to cooperate with us if we want to make investments to improve things along there. But I agree, waiting for the state to fix some of these things, we could be waiting a really long time. So I think And to me, that's like the ideal example of something we want to be looking at is, it's not a $120 million mega project. I mean, Newport, the last quote I got was like 70 million. For Newport to Sunset, Maple to, I think
Sorry.
it's just a side road over here, like that to put roundabout. It's over here.
In that direction.
In that direction. Yeah.
Gotta guess. Thank you.
They're mind-boggling numbers. And so I think part of my hope is just everything we kind of go down. I think we're trying to go down by the starting point being what can we actually afford to do? And then we're going to build a list of projects based on what we think we can afford to do. And that's in parks, it's in transportation, it's for city facilities, it's for everything we're going to do. It's going to start from that starting point of what's a realistic amount of money that I think we can get access to. And then we're going to try to find projects that fit in that list. And they're not going to be these big giant projects. They're going to be smaller projects. And I think like your point, that one would fall in that list of something.
That's like $10,000 maybe,
Yeah.
Sure, it's more than that, but it's like 10 feet.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But also noticeable and impacting the dots, right? For the community to be like, okay, I see my government working for me, right? Those are the tangible.
And I think to go back to like what's a successful outcome for 2026, you got to have a long-term vision. That's important.
Totally.
But at the same time, you can walk and chew gum. Like you have to do stuff
Exactly.
that is noticeable improvements to our community that happen in the next 12 to 18 months. And I think fixing stuff like that would fall on that list. And that's what I think you can do both. Like they're not mutually exclusive. So you have a long-term vision, you make short-term progress in these little bits and pieces throughout our city in different areas, from transportation to parks to facilities to public safety. And that to me is the successful outcome
Yeah.
of this whole process we're having today if we kind of land in that space.
Excellent. Yes.
Oh, well, just I wanted to say that I respect this mindset and like it. And it's part of why I came here is that I very much feel that in this point in time, we are on our own and cannot rely on a lot of outside resources. And so what can we accomplish here on our own to help this community is kind of the mindset we have to have in order to do anything. So I like that as a mindset of, okay, what do we actually have access to? What job, if they're the small ones, can we actually do? Is, I think, the right mindset to have going forward.
It also keeps you empowered and motivated, right? So you don't feel like you're at the wills of those that are outside of your community.
And I think a unique opportunity we have is if we, as a city governance structure here, commit in this parks and transportation space to making these investments. To Councilmember Adair's point, everyone else is broke. So when you go out for grants this summer, whether it's in parks or transportation, very few other places are going to have money to bring to that grant process. If we kind of say, hey, we're committed to doing this, and like I said, the parks levy would have to go to the voters. Other things could be councilmatic. Like we're looking really good, I think, this summer to kind of have staff unleashed on grant writing opportunities for all these different projects, because other jurisdictions are going to say we don't have any money to do it, and they're going to ask the grant they're applying for to pay 100% of it, and we're going to be asking for share participation. So I actually think if we can commit to this sort of path, I think we actually have the chance to fare very well in some of the grant process applications this summer, but they happen this summer. So this is why it goes back to the sense of urgency. Like we've got to come up with a commitment in the first, 4 to 6 months of this year that, hey, we're willing to go down this path of trying to make some investments now. And I think it will open up a lot of grant dollars that, because no one else has any money to put on the table right now.
So our current deferred infrastructure, 350 million, 400 million, like that. Just
It's more than 50 million.
yeah. That's just, the fundamental challenge is like, where do you even start? How do you parse it? We did have a public ad hoc committee, right, that looked at earlier on at infrastructure and the mechanisms to pay for infrastructure. And just, you got to parse it at some point, right? You got to say what's in that first 30 million, what's in the next 50 million, what's in the next 220 million.
Yeah. Right. But I think the street, I did a whole tour. I just drove around, with Bennett, looking at different street overlay throughout the city of Issaquah and the challenges we have ahead. And I think my job is to find the money in the budget so we can make sure we're making consistent infrastructure investments that people can rely on. It isn't at the whims of, oh, there's enough money in our budget to do it this year. I think our challenge is to try to figure out a way to make sure those investments are consistent and reliable, because if you don't prioritize them, you will fall behind. And I think, that being said, I think other cities are in worse shape than us, I think, but doesn't change the fact that we have to have budgets. The budgets you're going to see presented from us are going to prioritize like street overlay, making sure it's happening. And so those are the budgets that you will see, I think, coming from this administration as a starting point. So
I want to double down on what Tola said. There is a huge amount of deferred maintenance, and this building that we're in is one really good example of that. I want to make sure that we recognize all of the things that are already on the CIP that are needs before we're starting to add a whole bunch new to that. And also that we're looking at what our maintenance schedules are, whether or not we're investing enough in our fleet system so that we can keep that up to date, whether or not we are, what our pavement and overlay schedule is on that, what we are looking at as far as buildings that have roofs that are leaking and things like that. The school district, because of the way that they do funding, always kind of consistently has money for building maintenance. And one of the things that I'm always super impressed with Issaquah on is we can stretch a dollar, we can make something work, we can have all of the boxes piled up in the police station rather than going and getting storage and things like that. But when we push that out so many years, it becomes a bigger and bigger and bigger problem. So recognizing some of our long overdue needs before we necessarily dream big about new things, I think is something that I'm very interested in making sure that we have a full understanding of what those are.
Yeah, and the other thing is that just from an accounting perspective, right? Local governments and all governments actually operate on accrual accounting rather than generally accepted accounting principles. So if you actually I think we treat infrastructure as assets when really they are liabilities because that you have to pay for it and going there. So it would actually be really interesting for us to kind of actually take stock of what the total liability is and how that compares to, all the revenues that we have, so that we understand, okay, we're doing all these new things now. There's some maintenance obligation in the future. What do we have to do to make sure that we can continue paying for that, right? I think with this came up in the utility rates conversation, right? We have to keep maintaining the system we have. That is completely non-negotiable. We cannot have a dysfunctional sewer system. But then how do we make sure that, we have the money to pay for things 20 years down the line? If we're making new investments, they're going to have to be maintained, just having a full understanding of that so that we're not doing things now that we can be like, yay, we're doing all these great things. And then 20 years down the line, we're like, oh, now we're totally screwed. But I think part of that also is, getting more economic value out of our existing infrastructure, doing redevelopment, all the roads, it's the same roads. We're going to have to repave them anyway. If you can have more economic activity in that same area, that helps with our long-term fiscal sustainability. So, I'd be interested in seeing what types of analysis we could do on that as we're thinking about what new investments we're making now.
Yeah.
And the parts and pieces fit together.
Briefly on, or do you want to move on? On what we can learn from or avoid from what we see and how schools operate and are funded, that they have these ongoing what are basically operations levies, I think is interesting, in that schools in Washington several decades before most cities hit this had with their own structural budget crisis, where we have basic education that's funded at some level. And if you want to go from kind of a C level of quality to an A level of quality, individual jurisdictions have to decide to do that on their own. Unless something changes at the state level from our structural deficit perspective, I think cities will more and more have to take that path themselves if they want to, where we will have what can be based essentially basic city services, preservation of life and those sorts of things taking priority. And then if we want to have the nice to haves that people actually make you want to move to a city, like arts programs, all those sorts of things, we're probably going to have to take those out of the general fund and look in other ways of raising revenue on that at some point. I don't know if this is the point, but it's something that I think most cities are going to have to accept or allow services to continually cut until people can realize that. And it'll be a slow boiling of that frog. It'll be hard for a lot of people to notice until they don't have the music on Front Street anymore. And these things just start disappearing that people notice, but they're going to be cut because there's going to be money because we have to pay for the basics of government first. So I just want to come back to the conversation about deferred infrastructure and deferred that topic. Part of the challenge is going to be, how do you bring the public along?
Yeah.
You cross that with the stewardship conversation,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
We had, last time we checked, when we said, how much would we need to spend to be completely ADA compliant in this city? Last time we asked, it was something like 70 million, and that was quite a while ago. So if you went to the public and you said, we'd like a $70 million bond to put sidewalks in everywhere, you would have a very heavy lift. Versus we would like, here's a recreation package, right? That's a pool and 3 more soccer fields, maybe a cricket pitch, like that kind of stuff. The public would, beat a path to your door, and they're going to say, you want $70 million for your ramps on your sidewalks. And this came up the last time we tried to do a bond in the city, right? We did a camel bond, right? A camel is a horse designed by committee. Right. And so we put together like 5 things. Camels think they're quite well designed. Yeah, camels are wonderful. But like we put together like 5 things and we said, well, this thing appeals to this group and this thing appeals to this, but it didn't really, right? Like it included sidewalks on Sunset, right? Which if you live in the Highlands, great. But it wasn't something that the public said they wanted to spend like $25 million on, right? So that's just part of this conversation. As we talked about the $300 million worth of deferred infrastructure we have, right? We have to talk about, we can only go get the money that we can go get, right? We can hose ourselves financially and do it all councilmatic, but we know we're not going to do that, right? So it's what can we bring the public along for? Okay. And we don't really know. We just know it doesn't work, which is the last part.
Yeah. But as a conversation, as a priority, it's to be able to say, this is important for stewardship for long term and for the not to use the word sustainability too much, but the health and sustainability of the community, that you're not paying more down the road because you are short-sighted, right? And so as a priority, have a conversation.
And the feds do say you have to make progress on that $70 million deferred ADA, but it's like you can spend $4 a year.
Right.
But if you do some street overlay, I learned my tour triggers it. No, if you have
that's the worst.
No, you have to do the concrete sidewalk improvement first. Like there's lower level, overlay, like slurry seal. But other things, yes, you 100% you trigger it. But then that's a choice, like you say. But I think it's gonna probably, those upgrades will happen as you continually do kind of your street pavement management program. You're naturally going to trigger some of those because some of these things are just buying you an extra 5 or 10 years. Eventually, you're going to do the overlay. Once you do the overlay, you've got to do the sidewalk improvements that make them ADA. So it'll happen. It's just not going to probably happen overnight. I think it's a job.
And I just want to be really clear. I am in no way, I'm all for making our city more accessible for our folks with disabilities. It's just we don't have $70 million and don't know how we're going to find it.
Well, infrastructure investment, deferred maintenance, or new. Either way, that's a conversation around, what are you able to do now? What are the resources you have? And so, having the plan in place is step one. How are you going to tackle this? What are the resources that you have available currently? And what do you need to go find? So, naming it as something that you don't want to lose sight of can be really helpful to keep it in view. So,
all right. Advice on it. I think the Councilmember Walsh's fear, we're not going to fund investments in intelligent transportation, ITS stuff, by rating the overlay fund. That is 100% not going to be how it's funded. The overlay fund will be priority. And it's
Barb is just absolutely here in this moment.
It was something she was interested in, I will say.
Well, yeah.
I'm just saying, it will come from us finding, from being creative finding ways to enhance the other transportation infrastructure, but maintain the investments we need to make to maintain our infrastructure.
Okay, so I want to make a break for lunch, but what I want to just check with what I'm hearing, and tell me if I need to something differently, is that including infrastructure investment and kind of the focus on that. The conversation here, I think, is pretty clear around how you want to tackle that, and I want to just confirm. So the public facilities, parks and open space, public safety generally, the mayor laid out kind of hopes, expectations that were pretty clear. Does that feel comfortable, and that we kind of lay that out in terms of, I'm trying to prioritize what we want to really focus on conversations on, site question. So I'm hearing housing, economic development, maybe transportation mobility, although it sounds like that's also a longer term play, but the trails pieces, there are other pieces to that. And then fiscal sustainability, responsibility, sorry, I'll call it something different. Seem like the areas that we really want to have some conversation around today, but I want to confirm that. Do you want to talk about all?
You mentioned at the beginning that transportation-oriented development intersection of transportation mobility and fiscal sustainability, it deserves its own line item.
Okay. And some of these may find overlaps beyond this. And we'll listen carefully to the conversation and try to, encapsulate the conversation in a form that makes sense to council priorities. So we'll add that one too. So we'll have this. So I have housing, TOD, economic development, transportation mobility, and then fiscal responsibility. And then that's the big areas of conversation around what do you want that to look like in the next 12 to 18 months? Does that feel comfortable? And does that feel like we're missing something important? There we go.
Prioritize what gets talked about first, because I'm just also concerned we're going to run out of time.
Yeah, we can do that. I want to start. Yes, that we only have an hour.
Your humble city administrator would say the number one thing for all of you is housing, build things faster. Right. So I would recommend you start there.
Well, I think that touches.
Is that reasonable? I mean, they're all important. But if you don't leave here today with a clear understanding on where you're going, then that's a missed opportunity. The rest are all really important.
How does that overlay with the fact that we've got 2 sessions, one on transportation, one on housing, kind of coming up? Are we double dipping into those ideas?
I think the March housing discussion will be influenced by today's housing discussion.
Okay.
So I think this is
so we want to be able to come back in March and operationalize everything you decide today.
Swim.
Because it's the most important. I mean, and I think the mayor's already outlined the transportation piece.
Right.
You've kind of given us the bit. You want smaller things. The mayor wants smaller things. Sound transit, light rail, big, really important thing. That's how we've been tracking, because that meeting's only 10 days from now. We really need you to say and agree to what the barriers on permitting, real, perceived, whatever they are, the whiteboard stuff, how we're going to deal with all that. We got to talk about all that today, because we got to then spend the next month getting ready for you to make decisions, and then the rest collect. I don't want to de-emphasize any of the rest, but
yeah. Well, I think we've already sort of touched on some of the expectations that helps council on those others, but I think that, and tell me if you guys are seeing it a different way, the conversation around housing, economic development, and TOD touch on a lot of those things you've just described in terms of urgency and what that looks like a little bit. So with some nuance, perhaps, in different directions. So if we start with those 3, does that make sense to everybody?
So make street.
Housing, economic development, TOD. Yes.
So Council President DeMichelle was also really perplexed in talking to all of you, because you all talked about emergency management. And so she wasn't quite sure what piece of that you were still concerned about. So at some point today's the day to double back to that, because that was kind of her takeaway from her conversations with all of you, that kind of all popped up. Now, maybe it was because we had just gotten through the range she did it, those conversations, I think, in December, but I'll put that out there.
Well, in the conversation, what I had heard was that the community is at risk for emergency. We do it well. We want to continue to do that, but that there are risks of fire. There are risks of other, natural disasters to be.
So maybe if we get time, we could know.
I say, as being someone who just go through meeting staff, Jared seems like kind of the best emergency managing person you could find. I mean, he seems.
That's what I would say is I feel like we're doing it really well, and Jared is doing it really well. I would want to know what's the next part of that we could do well. Is it more staff? Is it we need to invest in, backup batteries? What is the next thing that we need to anticipate in that area so that we aren't going to end up behind?
There we go. On parks and open space, I'm very intrigued by the concept of Mayor Mullick's parks levy renewal. We know that people in this community like parks. People in this community will vote for parks levy. And so I think it would be good for us to have probably not today, but like it should definitely maybe another special meeting about like what that would look like.
Yeah, I think we're thinking there's facilities.
Okay, and
writ large.
On parks, this is a consideration for the same levy. If we can also think of what arts could look like, then that as well.
What's it?
Arts funding.
Again, Barb is here. Arts and parks.
This is being channeled.
I want more murals. I mean, I love it.
Okay.
Yeah, I just want to touch on what City Administrator Bapkowitz said. Some of Barb's concern was not about if we have a wildfire or if we have an earthquake, right? It's about if we have a really awful ice event, right? Or even just any in the coming back to this evolving state and federal environment, right? You can envision any number of calamitous events occurring in the next 12 months. Doesn't necessarily have to involve ice. Just take a look at any federal court docket that's occurring right now that has to do with states and their relationship to the federal government. The 8 of us all want to go help in the event that happens, right? So one of Barb's concerns was about Council President DeMichelle's concerns was about how do we make sure that we're all singing off the same hymnal when those things occur and that we're not going off in 8 different directions, right? Because we're all motivated by empathy and we all want to respond to the pain that we see in our community. But I think she had some concerns around the ICE thing, right? And about how we all, how can we respond in those kind of events in a way that we're all pulling in the same direction, even if we're not all exactly on the same page. So that was part of
that comes from leadership from the top and being able to express that out. And then, maybe we're less fractured. But.
Sure. I'm just saying that was the thing that she wanted us to consider talking about here today.
So can you all agree? So the breaking news piece, the administration can handle. There's something happening. This is what we know. We're good at that. If you are concerned about a city response, if the council will go to council leadership with that, and then the mayor can deal with council leadership to sort through that, that would be really helpful. Because there's too many permutations to what might happen. But if you're concerned that we're not doing something, or you go to council leadership and then the mayor can talk to council leadership and then we'll push out whatever the next steps might be. Does that make sense? So I think the breaking news stuff, we've got that. We know at the first ICE thing, we didn't think was as big a deal to all of you as it was. We know better. And so we will share when we hear that's happening or anything. So to that. Does that make sense?
I mean, we're talking about this. So just so everybody knows, I am talking, this is an issue I'm certainly concerned about. And I've been trying to talk with some members in the community to find out where there are disconnects between what we think we're doing and what we're actually doing. I think we're good at sharing what we know. I'm not sure that we're always good at finding what is actually happening. And I don't know if we have time to dig into this today, but that is, that's certainly where I was coming to Barb on this side of the conversation.
There we go.
And that may need to be
maybe this is another bike rack.
I think it is, but you're bringing it up as a topic we might want to talk about. I don't know that this is the right time to, but that's where my concerns with public safety and emergency management are, in terms of making sure that our policies are clearer than they currently are, and that those are debated, essentially, in terms of what we do.
On some of this stuff, like somebody in the thing last week, today said it'd be nice if our website had stuff in like Spanish and other languages around know your rights and substance, I think, now.
Yeah.
It went on.
But I think Councilmember Nichols' position is not, because
Yeah.
the world is different, the lines are different, and how are we reacting to those different lines?
Yeah. And can we have those discussions in advance of them happening instead of having to always, understandably, react?
Sure.
Well, it's getting in alignment, so making sure you have a shared set of expectations.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know what next good not. I don't know how else to do it.
I know, it's a quick bullet, but that will ping your memory enough.
We could do a more organized bunch if people want.
Emergency management response policies.
They're thinking we were going to work over lunch or not.
Well, I think we should quick break and then come back and keep going.
Well, that's just,
Yeah.
but I think we come back and have that discussion another time.
We could do that maybe over lunch because that actually. There we go. 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 About them. But I want to just do a quick check it. How are we feeling? Are we doing okay?
Russell's very happy with the food. So.
It was good.
It does help. Now you know what's the attribute chart. We're going to go quickly before that sets in. Okay, so we only have, an hour and 15 minutes. So we'll have to be relatively intentional about this conversation. So I want to make sure that we're on the same page with what we want to cover. So we had a number of topics that still have some, let's get some clarity around what we mean by that. And we can acknowledge that there may be some interplay between that. That's fine. But so housing affordability or housing generally, I would say maybe or economic development, TMD, the opportunities like that, transportation mobility, again, all of this sort of maybe, have opportunities connected to them, and then potentially, setting on fiscal responsibility for eliminates what are revenue levers. Put that in italics because we may or may not have enough time to get to all of these. And so does that feel comfortable in terms of trying to work through these? And I put one question there, but the bigger question starts off with, when you say housing is a priority, what does that mean to you, right? And so gathered in that equitable question, that's kind of where we're going for. So, yes.
I think the first thing on housing affordability, we need to distinguish whether we're talking about affordable housing, the kind that Arch does, 60-30, 60-80 for the AMI, or we're talking about bringing housing to Issaquah that is affordable for people that are earning workable wages in town, the 80 AMI and 100 AMI and above. They're two different categories we need to be intentional about in our discussion.
Totally. And two different ways to solve the problem. Right. Absolutely. Yeah.
I would start with both our commitments and our plans, right? We have commitments to PSRC, and we have a plan in the form of the Central Issaquah plan. Okay. And
Use the words on that.
Oh, sure. Sorry. Isn't it PSRC?
Yeah.
Puget Sound Resource Council.
Regional, yeah.
Regional Council. We have 2050 goals at the current set.
Right.
In addition, we have a Central Issaquah plan.
Right.
That calls for development on the valley floor.
Yep.
And it's a comp plan.
And our comp. There you go.
Uh-huh.
So I would start there.
Great. Okay.
And how are we doing? How are we not doing? There was a pre-COVID trajectory and there's a post-COVID trajectory, and they're very different.
Okay. And so the commitment, first of all, to those plans and the goals that are laid out in them. I'm not going to have time to list all of those, but just to, and I'm assuming that everybody is, you'll get up to speed. Reasonably aware of the context within them. Is that a fair assumption that you're committed to keeping focus on those long-term plans?
Well, I think, to me, success is you have things we know that, to Councilmember Nichols and Jake's point, that make it difficult to navigate our process in a timely fashion. But I think for Walsh, I like the term kind of natural affordability, which is just more, could be rental units in the 300, 400 square foot range. It could be more home ownership opportunities in the 700 to 1,200 square foot range. So I think to Councilmember Joe's point, we're going to pursue affordable housing, things like the Transit Development Project now. Any chance they come up, we will go after those. If there's public subsidy dollars that we can have, we will get them. I think our question is, knowing those the public subsidy dollars are very finite and we can't control what's available. What we can control is how do we create an environment to get what we would refer to as natural affordable units based on basically being smaller than what's currently in our community, and what kind of changes do we have to make to attract people to invest in building those homes. But I don't have the answer to that. But I think, to me, if we come out of this discussion with some ideas on that front, it makes it a lot easier to come back to markets and work.
So I'm going to say something that's going to make Wally mad. I think we are past time that we need to hire a full-time specialist on this subject. I think that we have these conversations and we say, but we don't know how to do it, right? Bothell and Woodinville did this, but we don't know how they did it. You know, I don't think it's hiring more consultants. I think that this has been a problem. I ran on this in 2009, and I ran on it in 2013, 2017, 2021, and now again in 2025. And it's, you know, we've had bright spots along the way, but it is not the trajectory that we want. So I think in the same way that we invest in economic development and we invest in, certain other areas, I think it's time to have somebody on staff who can just quickly do it, right? Who can be sitting here and saying, well, here's why we don't have what Bothell has, right? And here's how we could get what Bothell has. And we don't have that expertise.
Just clarifying question. That's all you're taking. And then you said I ran on this in 2009. Housing generally?
Workforce housing. Every 4 years, I have said workforce housing and living wage jobs. Right. And the public has seen fit to reelect. So, but it never goes away. Ever.
It's a persistent problem.
Yeah. Well, I just wanted to clarify too, because it's
sure. Workforce housing, right? Housing for what we now like to call the missing middle. We did at the time. We didn't call it that. Arthur Sullivan told me we didn't have any problem for like 5 years, and I said, "Yeah, we do."
Whole common term these days than I used to. Yeah.
So I think toward that idea, rather than jumping necessarily to we need a new staff member, starting with the problem you've defined then is Bothell and Woodinville have been able to create a certain type of housing that hasn't happened here. And so maybe starting with what do we think the problem is the problem, and I would say we have a housing shortage that does not enable the workers who live here to be able to afford housing. And some of the ways we will inevitably need to work on to create more of that naturally affordable housing is size. Some of it is barriers that we have put into our code that have put too many requirements on that make it too expensive or difficult to build. And so I would posit, I think, and I'm jumping right to what I said, don't jump to solution, but I feel like we need to have a home builder roundtable that the experts who have tried to build our code and have run into barriers, what are the things that they've identified? Because they might have things in like stormwater codes that they're like, yeah, you've been off for 10 years and I've never considered building in Issaquah since then because of these problems.
Well, now I'm going to say something to make Russell mad because I'm an equal opportunity troublemakers.
Yeah.
Terrific. Thank you. I want a neutral third party, right? Part of the challenge to me is if I'm an investor and I can go invest a certain amount of money in Bothell and I can invest a certain amount in Issaquah, and I can make $10.20 in Bothell and $10.10 at Issaquah, then I'm going to go invest in Bothell, not in Issaquah. But that doesn't mean there's a problem with code or any of that kind of stuff, right? So I would like a third party whose answer isn't you have to help me make it pencil out, but can actually say, here's, that can compare our policies to other municipalities. I picked Bothell and Woodinville because they're comparable to our size. And if we had what they had, we probably would be meeting our central Issaquah plan. And we'd be a lot further along towards our PSRC goals than we are currently. Because they have huge 5/1 or 4/1 developments in both of their downtowns. Right. So I don't think it's a bad idea to ask developers, but whenever they come see us, they're always like, you just have to give us more money and then we can do what you want. like, yeah, I don't know if that's
I think to Councilmember Walsh's point, that like King County Housing Authority could be one of the people that's at that table because they've just gone through our code. And so they don't have to all just be on the private side. I think we could invite nonprofit.
Yeah, affordable housing builders.
we can do both. I think we can just try to invest in our own internal expertise and try to listen to those who have at least nominally tried to invest in the area and understand why they didn't.
Yeah.
And I think I want to try to give I think I would like to give our current staff the ability to have clear guidance from this group and see how that works out. Because I have faith.
There we go.
Between many and Kristen, like I have faith they just need the right guidance. I mean, and so this is the part of the challenge, I think, is it comes out of what this discussion looks like. And I think the thing I'm hoping for is to kind of hear from everybody. What are the ideas? Like what ideas are out there? And I mean, I think like self-certification, I think is really interesting to talk about as saying, hey, we could do self-certification on ADUs. We do self-certification in general for projects. If they hire a professional engineer and they say, this is sound, like, do we have to pay somebody separate? Because then that goes into the billing and also slows down the timeline. Like all these things, I think there's a lot of ideas and I think we've heard, but we haven't all been in a room to have all the ideas put on a board. And so always point, we don't have a lot of time left. So I think if people have ideas, I would like to just have them so we can kind of go through, we can then ask staff who's in this weeds of how these things work to say, well, okay, some of these are easier than others, but we don't even know what the universe of options is right now. So I think we need to leave today with a universe of options.
So the developer roundtable is scheduled for February 26th.
So let's get I'm like ideas on the board now.
It's agreed.
My idea is hire an expert.
Yep. Well, and just to be clear, so this is are we talking about workforce housing then specifically, or are we talking about housing generally and the opportunities available to them? I guess that.
I think it's all of the above.
Okay. I just wanted to make sure because we had the conversation around what is that? So our housing. Oh, did you have a comment?
Yeah, I was gonna comment, on the home builder option. I think King County Housing Authority, other, nonprofit affordable housing builders are very. I mean, I went to the King County Affordable Housing Symposium in Redmond on Thursday, and they're very interested in participating. I think also just generally, to your point about we want to have smaller home ownership options. It's been interesting to see like what things in new construction Issaquah is selling for compared to. I have some friends in Seattle that are buying new construction townhomes in Seattle. This townhome in Seattle, she's like, oh, I'm overpaying. It's so expensive. It's like $900,000. And for me, living in Issaquah, I'm like, that is like 40% less than what the equivalent home would sell for in Issaquah. And so I think they have the same labor costs, materials costs, all sorts of other things. So I really want to understand like what in our code is making things that much more expensive than in Seattle. It could also be that permitting is an aspect of it. So I would want to, and I think we've made progress on the front, but I would like to see how we compare to some of the other cities, especially the ones that are doing really well. And some of the other processes, like what are some of the best practices? The self-certification for ADUs where it's like, the professional engineer architect can sign off on it themselves. That's great. I think also for other buildings could there be something where, the builder they can choose from a preferred list of people to check their work and they actually just contract with them directly without having to have a city be the middleman to check their work. Like that seems like something we could do. So just finding ways to make the process smoother without sacrificing quality, right? Because I think with ADUs, it's so small, it's not really going to collapse. But for like workers, you really do want to have someone else check their work. But if they can do that directly, and like my firm, sometimes we do that on like energy related stuff. But just making it easier, streamline the process.
I'd also like to see a comparison between multiple cities. So at least at a high level, if we have cities that we think are doing a better job than we are in whatever way that may be, can we try to identify some salient points of their code that are noticeable differences than ours that may or may not be causing some of the things that we've observed? If they're actually causing them or not, is it as a level below that. First, understanding what some of the differences are would be a very useful first step.
Yeah. So there's tons of items in there. It could be, parking requirements.
Yeah, exactly.
Let's try to get them up.
Getting them.
Yeah. So parking requirements, self-certification, types of housing, whether or not we effectively have a review process and everything for different townhomes versus 5-bedroom ones. There's the difference between structured parking and not. There's
FNR,
yep.
architectural standards, floor area ratio,
FDR.
There we go.
architectural standards.
Yep.
There we go.
Open space, private, outdoor amenity space requirements.
Like right now, you have to have a balcony. Right?
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Mandating underground utilities is very expensive.
Oh,
We need to take a look at our tree code,
yeah.
balancing retention versus infill and remodels. We need to take a look at road widths for developments. Can they be less than full standard roads that go into some developments because they're not traveled all the time? Are our fees excessive for the ones that we control, transportation, parks? Do we compare them to other cities?
Did you say we're at RFP?
Fees, like impact fees.
Impact fee.
Okay, I gotcha. I misheard.
Yep.
Thank you.
Are there excessive frontage requirements that we have
There we go.
in the way?
There we go.
Is there inconsistent water utility hookup fees and requirements come to mind?
Okay, so
Peer
looking,
review, leave that on there.
Yeah. Self-certification. Also inclusionary zoning, whether or not requiring builders to build affordable housing at 80% is actually reducing the number of units, or whether or not they're willing to.
there we go. There we go. There we go. Okay, so some deep analysis in terms of the barriers that could be getting in the way of developers, investors wanting to build in Issaquah. Like that's part of
I don't think they're saying deep analysis.
Okay,
I think
no,
they're
okay,
saying,
that's fair.
right? I mean,
Okay.
you don't want to plan that says for the next 2 years, we're going to study this.
No,
and come
that's
back to you.
fair. How about an array of areas of interest? That's, I guess somebody said.
So there's a thing we haven't touched on yet, and it's not a list of item, like it's a more fundamental question, which is, do we want to create market rate housing in the hopes that impacts workforce housing? Because there is a spread of opinions on that in this council.
Okay.
So more fundamental, if somebody comes back with here's a solution for how to get more market rate housing built in the next 2 or 3 years, I don't think you'll have 7 council members that all say huzzah.
That's why I preference, I think, Councilmember Walsh's natural affordability. I think the challenge is, I think Deputy President Martz doesn't want us to do all this, just have a bunch of $2 million condos or $1.5 million townhomes get built.
Right.
Because that is, they will sell in Issaquah. We already have those. I think our challenge is, how does our code incentivize rentals in the really kind of micro space and ownership? Like, is ownership in the 700 to 1,200 square foot space is not going to be selling in Issaquah, I don't think, for 7 figures. I just don't think it is. And so I think you're going to create natural affordability, which I think it's a big difference between building an 80 to 120% AMI. I think the numbers are very clear. That improves life for everybody. Building something in the $2 to $3 million range, I think it's much harder to argue whether or not how much that's trickling down to benefit kind of everyone trying to live in our community. But I do think 80 to 120% AMI units benefit.
And that's, I would say, in many cases, most of what is being built. The other part of that is we're in a situation where we have a cruel musical chairs type thing. There are not enough homes going around. And so the people who are workforce housing are not getting options. Whereas if there is a situation where more homes are built, even if they are luxury, it opens up spots. And I heard this directly from the Rowleys, that when Atlas was built, they could not raise their rents for a year. They had to offer 2 months of free rent. And so the older homes that people are moving from to the new luxury housing opens up spots for people who have a lot of heavy need in our community.
I'd like to see us doing both. There is a pretty overwhelming body of evidence that creating housing at almost any level reduces housing costs at all levels. I'm unaware of any convincing.
Well,
There is disagreement in the room on that statement. We're not going to solve it this afternoon. I just wanted to highlight that there is disagreement on that statement. That's fine, but
There we go.
we should have some process to be able to discuss that. Characterizing it as a settled subject is overstating it. The law is supply and demand. I was just saying that you and I have discussed the fact that there are. I can go find studies that say that that market rate doesn't help workforce, and you have studies that say that it does, and we can put our competing studies on. We're not going to solve it today. I'm just saying that it is a subject that will impact how this council responds to housing policy down the road, and we should spend some time figuring it out. That's all I'm saying.
But I think you're talking about creating the environment, how we want to set the table for housing to come in or not. Two more that are controversial that we haven't put up yet are our setback requirements and our wetland and stream buffer requirements. We all like our streams and wetlands and the way they are, but if you talk to some of the people that want to build projects in there, that has been a deterrent to building a project. I'm not saying it needs to be changed, but it's just a factor that's there.
I mean, what I'm hearing, there are different paths to get to that most to affordability, right? And so that's fine. But I think that there is agreement that we should pull up the hood and be like, what are the things that are potential barriers to housing, right?
But there are just things to talk about as a camp before we get an ordinance in front of us for consideration. If the mayor likes to get to 7 hours, there are things that we need to have a conversation.
And I think that's a principle that we really landed on earlier this morning, the importance of making sure to hear different perspectives. But I think that for today, what we want to do is help to shape the focus, which is increasing housing affordability capacity in Issaquah, right? For lots of these things, the work plan and the details must follow. Right? And so today we want to make sure that we're having a conversation around what's that mean to you.
The one I would add is just the infill requirements, because I think that's where we're a real outlier, I think, some of the other communities in terms of if you're building on a lot that's already, like, what do we expect someone to do? If they buy a lot off Gilman Boulevard here, it is currently asphalt. Like, what do we expect them to do? And right now, the expectations of the city are for them to put in all the current code standards. So that means if the asphalt currently goes up to 50 feet of the stream, they got to pull out 100 feet of asphalt, which means what they have left to put homes on is substantially smaller. And so it provides a giant disincentive for people to invest in building our community in that area where we want them to build. Because this, I think, we also, I think, have to be intentional that, like, Talus is more or less built out. I mean, there's one last project obviously going in. The Highlands already has 2,000 homes under basically permit that are going to be built in the next 4 to 6 years. Squawk is, I mean, these other communities are pretty well established. We're really focused on this area north and south of I-90 along this corridor, which is currently all paved. And our question is, can we get homes on this parcel, and what in our code stands out from Hawthorne Woodinville? I would say a big thing that does stand out is that requirement that you are supposed to rip up asphalt and put in a stream buffer that does not currently exist. I think is a challenge to get people to invest here. But that is a community discussion. I mean, it's not there accidentally. It was put there because people had strong feelings but I think we now, in hindsight, have 3 or 4 years of lived experience. That requirement means Gilman Boulevard will look the same 30 years from now as it does today, I think, is the reality of it.
If we look at our map of the regional growth center within the central Issaquah area, I believe this is true, that there's not a single house or a single unit of housing that's been built in our regional growth center, which is a subset of Central Issaquah. Transit-oriented development will be right at the border of that and just inside, but otherwise, I think the answer is 0 for how many homes we've built in that area. If anybody can correct me, this is just me playing with maps, but I think this is true.
Yep. And that's a threat to our regional growth center.
Designation.
Yeah.
We're reapplying for next month. So staff has done that so that it comes to, I'm on that board as an alternate for PSRC, but we do want to get that.
Yeah, I think one of the other things that I would want to explore is, I think Kevin mentioned floor area ratios. I think right now we have very restrictive rules on like the number of units per acre, which is a huge disincentive against building smaller units. Because the incentive to do that is that you can put more units into the same space, but then you're capped at a certain number. So it's like, oh, well, then we're all going to build like 1,000 square foot, 3-bedroom apartments. And it's like, is there a way that we can relax that in some cases, or even just say like, you can build we can have rules on what the outside looks like. For example, like in Old Town, I understand why there are architectural standards, but why do we care how many units are on the inside, right? Like, for example, I have friends who, 5 of them will rent a single family home together, and that's totally fine. But that is no different than it looking like a single family home on the outside, but then having, 5 micro studios on the inside with a shared kitchen. So like, just like enable those opportunities, because when we look at things for population growth and housing growth, the average household size is decreasing, and that's actually driving a significant amount of growth in the number of homes needed, because there's going to be, it's like right now the average household size, I actually don't know the numbers, but basically, so people
Mine's drawing it up.
Yeah, people are going to need to downsize, and how can we enable more of that while also, for example, maybe my parents, for example, live in a 5-bedroom, single family home. Could there be a world in which that could be split up into a few housing units, or is that not legal? Because then it would be 4 units and those types of things. So kind of exploring how we could use that to also get more homes, but in a similar footprint that already exists.
2 more items for the list. Transparency requirements. We have a requirement for a certain amount of window space and step backs, which are different from setbacks. Step backs.
Sod modulation.
So
Okay.
So to Councilmember Jang's point about related to ADUs, we did a turn on ADUs like 5 or 6 years ago, right? It seems like it would be valuable to understand how that has or hasn't, right? We loosened up the ADU language considerably. Like we made a big turn, spent a lot of time on it. And I don't know if I don't think we've had a lot of ADUs built since then. So there's a question on, again, last time I looked up the number, it's quite low, like 20.
Impervious surface. Sorry. I'll just email it. Yeah.
Well, what do you mean exactly by that?
In Old Town area, 50% of the land needs to be permeable to water for the aquifer. And so it means that 50% of the land can't have homes built on it. So that's something to think through, figure out what that is affecting. And in an area that has high impervious surface requirements so that our water aquifer can be recharged, maybe we need to increase heights or, yeah.
Okay. Give me one more. How quickly we are compliant with new state mandates versus peer cities and other cities overall. For example, some of the things from last year, I think we've got like 3 years to comply with them. How are other cities doing? Are we choosing the right speed to be doing that?
You've been early on compliance most.
Well, I think
That was great.
5290, we were pretty early. And so with middle housing, I think we were a little late, but we were kind of right in the middle of where the mill's finished.
Yeah.
I want to get operational. Next step.
what you do.
Just procedural next steps.
Okay, well, let me just show what we summarized, and then I'll let you jump in there. Because I think that some of these topics too, we're starting to think about how do you quantify our impact and success, which I think is also good about. We talked about metrics earlier, and so looking at some of those rates of return and how it's impacting good things to keep in view. So let me just summarize at the high, not the detail level, the high level of what I heard in terms of areas of action. We'll call them that. So first of all, lifting up the hood and looking at all the requirements. What are barriers that could be potentially getting in the way of development? And so it's a long list. And Julie's got a whole long list of there that you captured. So that's one. From there, then looking at how to streamline the process. And that might be, directly related to some of the things you uncover in that analysis. We talked about, bringing people together in the development roundtable. And so you have an opportunity to hear and listen and learn from others that might be potentially inform the direction you have. Potential for looking at capacity, staffing capacity. So those were the kind of the four kind of actionable things I heard. And then it's kind of evaluating progress. So you have ADUs, policy, success, looking at turnaround times for state mandates. So kind of lots of things to potentially drive the conversation to the next level. Does that feel like a decent recap? And then I'll let
Well, you all want more than that, I think. So, we'll come back on March 9th, with an outline of a plan through the balance of the calendar. So we will look to see what we can commit to do. Some of this we're going to have to spend some time on. So we'll prioritize things that we think we can do. 3 months, 6 months, 9 months kind of time frame. We'll look at resource issues because we only have one principal planner that does this sort of work. We have some money already allocated for $250,000.
Yes.
Which we were kind of waiting for today to hear your thoughts before we program that out. So we'll come on the night with some specific recommendations on how we'll have done the roundtable. Alexis, raise your hand, Alexis. She's your housing person. Her job is to do all the things that Jill said. So that we'll talk more about how that will work. And we'll also talk about funding for housing. We have affordable housing money, which we've not programmed out from the IHIP. So we'll talk a little bit more about that. But that would construct basically a work plan. I think we're probably not going to have a citywide work plan of stuff, but we're probably going to have subject-specific work plans. So that would be the plan, to do a work plan that would take us through the end of 26. Does that make sense? What you're hoping to hear, or are you hoping to hear something different?
There we go. There we go. There we go.
You're hoping to hear something different.
I think that sounds great.
Because we can't recalibrate. We can't every 3 months decide that we're going to reinvent this wheel. We could reinvent it now for the current calendar year. But when we come to you in March, we're going to say, this is the plan, and we're going to commit to go with what's on this plan through the end of the calendar year. And we want you to feel okay about that.
Yeah. I think the other thing that I would like for us to all come to agreement on is what are the metrics that we're going to use to evaluate our success.
Okay.
I think a key one is probably number of, homes permitted in Central Issaquah, number of homes built in Central Issaquah, affordability of those units. And I think one of the things, and maybe this is getting a little off track, but to the extent that we're able to track the affordability level of non-covenant restricted homes, I think that's also something that would be very useful for us to know, because right now, on affordability, we're just like, oh, we have this number of income restricted units, but then that doesn't say anything about what is, the affordability of other homes in the area. And, I would, to the extent, I know this is probably something that's really, really difficult to get data on, but to the extent that we're able to do it, it'll help a lot with our.
So another piece, Dale, would be working with the planning staff. We already have some of those metrics in place, so we just have to look at what we have, what we would need to add.
Yeah. And the size of new homes built for both rental and ownership, I think would be another metric.
So we'll come, we'll talk about.
So as a part of what's coming back then is the data that's available and you can track it and respond on, Molly, or along with the work plan, or no?
I mean, we'll come up with some data points that we think we can. Some of the last ones that Councilmember Jane was referring to, harder to get. But we can find out if they're just harder or impossible. And so we can speak to that. But the hope would be that we bring this to you, we get your feedback, and then we go.
And I think another thing, not to complicate it, but you have current residents applying to remodel like a kitchen or whatever. I think we got to look at how much of our permit staff time is being taken up by those things. Like what on that list of things could we possibly visit to say how involved do we want to be in some of these projects?
Yes.
And because I think if you look at whatever we do here, we have to make progress to the current residents of how they interact with the permit department to do stuff, any sort of addition to their house, no matter what it is, bathroom, kitchen, any structure. I think we've heard from people that process they wish was quicker. So I think it's kind of like a parallel track. And I think our fundamental challenge, kind of talking to mayors from around the country this past week, is the common refrain from most cities is, we haven't revisited this in 20 years, so we got to go in and fix it. We are an outlier in the fact that we literally just revisited this in 22 and 23, but the changes we made didn't lead to any permits, anyone applying to build here. So we made a lot of changes in very recent history compared to other cities that are going through the process we're talking about today. So I think to Wally's point, we have to figure out, like, it's not fair to staff to just flip-flop every 5 years. Like, I think we have to really say, hey, our goal is, if the goal is to get how many homes are actually physically to get built in this, section of Issaquah we're talking about, north and south of I-90, like, what does that look like? And I think that's how you judge success. And
I think the staff's general feeling is that despite the macroeconomic stuff that's happening everywhere, is that the environmental restrictions in Issaquah deter building. And so if the council's prepared to, pull some of those back, that should have a real impact. But we'll speak more to that. And I think that's what we'll speak more to that.
Some of the price categories can fit into the 1220 legislation, and that's an easy way to have apples to apples in the comparison to
Yep. And time to budgeting. Yep.
Okay.
One other quick thing. Is there a role to leverage our relationship with Arch in this? Like when I think about Metro,
Come to Monday night to the council meeting. So
Is
a regional coalition for housing.
the capacity.
They're the multi-city organization based out of Bellevue that we are members of, and we contribute money to every year, both operationally and towards projects.
so you contribute money, the housing may or may not be built in your city. Their point is everyone puts money in a pot and they build it where it makes the most sense. So you could be donating money that gets built outside of your community, but for the region,
for the regional greater good.
regional greater good. That is the whole premise of that organization.
and you'll hear Monday night from them that who worked. Alexis, did you? Oh, I saw it. But so you're going to hear, we use their staff second only to Bellevue to make affordable housing faster.
Great to hear.
So you will hear a little bit of that. It's a big presentation. It's a packet's already out, right? So it's and there's a pretty substantial presentation.
All right. And she look great again. Okay. Do you feel comfortable with where we are in terms of next steps? And I mean, quite clearly a priority, right? We can name this as a priority for the next year, 2026. Okay. Can we move to the next one? See how many we can get through.
I just want to point out, we did the hard one first.
Right.
See.
Likely. Right. All right. So can we just go through the order we have here? Talk about economic development next. Okay. So we're talking about, and we added that question, what is the problem we're trying to solve? Just to provide some definition to it. And then, what's the area of focus for next 12 months?
I think this one is the one where it's the biggest, just like lack of consensus on what the problem is that we're trying to solve. I read our economic development action plan, and to me, honestly, it doesn't seem like it addresses economic development. It's like we want more businesses in the arts or outdoor recreation when, I think most of us would think of economic development as attracting large businesses with, office jobs and those types of things. So I think, honestly, and I don't know necessarily how much time we want to spend, coming up with the whole plan. But like, if we do agree that attracting jobs is a priority, then I think then the question is, what can we do to do that? And so then the question is like, what competitive advantages do we have over Bellevue or Redmond? And I would say the advantage that we do have is that we have proximity to Costco. And I was thinking of this because when we sold off City Hall Northwest, it was to a toy company that is a major supplier to Costco. So potentially one of the strategies we could do is like, hey, who are the major suppliers to Costco? Could we meet with them and advertise to them, hey, come to Issaquah, we're great, and then you can be super close to Costco HQ, and that could help. Because, just like going out and having Mayor Millett talk to random CEOs may not necessarily be as effective as like, oh, we have Costco as kind of like the anchor. They're going to be here for the long term. They just built their super beautiful, fancy new office. How can we kind of build the ecosystem around them? So
there's a corollary to that involving Swedish and the medical facilities around Swedish. Same concept.
Well, and quite honestly, we probably need to add Swedish to our list because we don't want them to close that hospital.
No, we don't.
So
that was
Lexus, we talk business,
Hospital.
it's a full service.
they have 175 beds.
Swedish is a
All right, so please keep in mind. Go ahead.
There we go.
Please keep in mind we give hundreds of thousands of dollars to visit Issaquah each year to be our economic development tourist arm out there. So maybe it's too much. Is that about the right number? What did we get on?
Not that much.
Visit Issaquah.
$120,000. Yeah, to them. So they're the ones that are out there trying to get the business for us to fill our hotels, have people come here to dine, recreational activities, and they work with LTAC. And so they're a significant arm. We need to figure out how to coordinate with them with whatever we decide we want to do, because they have been following our lead so far as kind of incongruous as it might be from time to time. They've been following what we've been telling them to kind of do at this point.
And they're they're definitely trying to get heads in beds and stuff like that. This is, I think, Tola is a little more focused on, it's weird because you have the old Microsoft campus at South End of the Lake, which was 3 giant buildings.
They're trying to building 3 employers too.
Very affordable in terms of price point. Like, I don't know, to your point, is there a way we can market like that campus and those opportunities to find out if there is a business that would be interested in them? But I don't know how it'd be awesome if it worked out. I just don't know what we could bring to the table aside from the fact that we're an amazing community.
Just connecting supplier with demand, right? This came about originally when Mariah Batiste and I were the council leadership. We were both working at companies that were relocating. Both of the companies she worked for and the company I worked for were both based in Bellevue. It was clearly going to be a CEO follow. We were going to be wherever the CEO wanted us to be. And both of us had companies that couldn't find something in Issaquah that worked for us. And so this idea of figuring out supply and demand, putting them together, I had a situation where we needed like 120,000 square feet of industrial and maybe 30,000 square feet of general commercial. You just couldn't do it. It didn't exist in Issaquah, and it couldn't be built in the time frame we needed. So we just have to figure out where companies are out there looking. If we could get 5% of Bellevue's squeeze, right, we would be amazing. Like, it would be transformative if we could get 5% of what Bellevue's doing.
I think that supply is really important. we couldn't find a place for us as a city. So we know there is a squeeze out there. And so, but I think we need to have that conversation around economic development. What's the problem we're trying to solve? That clarity, and then figure out what is the barrier to that goal.
So question, because I'm hearing when we talked when this first came up, it sounds like the focus initially anyway is on attracting and supporting, facilitating companies' new jobs, like bringing people in, whether it's companies that relate to existing people, but it's really about the larger companies and bringing them, attracting them versus what we heard earlier, which could be also supporting small business, or like these are different directions.
I would say it that way. I would say it in terms of living wage jobs. Like you can do business incubators, right? Business incubators don't have to be huge, but they bring living wage jobs. I would like to bring jobs that the people who live in our housing here would find just, people who live here could work here. It doesn't have to be everybody, it doesn't, we could still have people live in town, but to have more jobs beyond Costco or living wage jobs.
I think of economic development where you have to, I think our kind of asset we have to make sure it doesn't go away is historic Issaquah, because it's been there for 100 years. But I think as a small business restaurant owner, if you don't have foot traffic, those businesses are all at risk. So I think part of our economic development strategy from the administration is this idea of closing Front Street for 10 weekends in the summer. I think we're looking at doing a shared parking program where we might incentivize people financially to put their parking spaces, if they're along that corridor, into a shared parking pool that people can use on the evenings and weekends. Like, we're looking at ways to draw foot traffic, because from economic development perspective, you need more foot traffic on historic Front Street if you want it to be vibrant and thriving 20 years from now. I think if we get everything right, and my hope is that area on Gilman, north and south of I-90, looks substantially different 15 years from now, but historic Front Street still sort of has the same charm and eclectic feel. But to keep that charm and eclectic feel, it's not going to happen organically. I think we have to do things that draw people to that part of our town, and then we have the ability with light rail and the land use decisions we make to create its own completely different kind of vibrant, walkable village feel in an area right now that looks very similar when I came out to Issaquah when I was a kid. I mean, Gilman in the 70s and 80s looked very similar to how Gilman looks now. I mean, that's when it was built. It's a very large strip mall with giant sea of parking, and that's just what's there. I think so. Economic development, in my mind, though, we have to keep in mind that historic Front Street corridor is part of our vision.
There we go.
So 2 years ago, the city council adopted an economic development action, which is supposed to be a 3-year plan from 24 to 27. So are you saying you want to redo this plan? You want to revisit the plan? You want to look at the component parts of it? Because the plan was basically, let's look at what our strengths are for smaller businesses. So that's where you get the outdoor recreation, the creative economy, and the home-based businesses. Now, the world's a bigger place, 2 years out. Is the focus, again, to start over? Is the focus to, have this document in front of you, hear where we're at, get some feedback from some of the discussion here, and then decide what would you like the next step to be?
There we go. There we go. There we go. There we go.
So how are we doing on that plan?
Maybe that's the start.
I think that's a good starting point. I think also just having the conversation around what problems are we trying to solve, and did that plan address that, or did it
addressing it?
Yeah, right. Or was it focused on a different set of
There we go.
Issaquah businesses be? Yeah.
So the why of why we want to bring in
The why of city economic development. 'Cause there's a difference between saying, we want to take advantage of the idea that we have green space near us and outdoor recreation businesses and all of that. That's different from the concept of we're looking for living wage jobs, and it's a different approach to a problem.
And it may be that the sitting council just has a different view, and that's perfectly reasonable. I'm just trying to operationalize how we get from an adopted plan that was in theory supposed to go one more year.
So really 2 more years, right? Because it goes to 27, or is it end?
Well, 2 more years.
So if it's working or if it's not working.
Well, no, but I think that the goalposts are changing. So I think if this worked in 24 for the council, it doesn't seem to be working in 26 for the council.
We had a hope when we passed it. That doesn't mean that it's working, right? I mean, if you tell me, here's the vision that you had 2 years ago, you did this thing, and we're executing to it, and it's going great, then I'm less likely to want to fiddle with it. But if you say,
why don't we start there? and we'll give you an update on where we're at. We'll address some of these other issues, the corporate headquarters stuff, all of that we can address. And I will turn it to talk about retention too, because REI is
here now, but they may leave. Like we may have to.
Swedish is in deep trouble, and unless we're able to help them in some way, they may just close that hospital because it might be cheaper for them just to shut it than it is to continue to operate. And what does that do to us as a community? So we can, we've got committee of the whole in February and March. Phil, do you want to do a special something, or you want to wait till April?
There we
We're
go.
also getting to the point where we're going to start talking about budget
There we go.
in May.
There we go.
So you want a special meeting to talk about?
I would defer to council leadership and let that.
You've been waiting all day to see it, and that
There's also facilities and parks. So,
okay. So
Let's agree for today that the starting point of this conversation is to put fresh eyes on the economic development strategy. What's working, what's missing, it just need a refresh.
I would suggest it could be a talk because I think we have a May retreat the second weekend in May, maybe.
sure,
And I think that we could come back at that one with more information on the current economic development plan and what's working.
Okay.
Perfect.
All right. We're going to move to the next one. That gives us some momentum, right? Move that forward.
No.
Great. All right. TOD was our next topic.
So I think everything that we're doing in the first topic is going to enable transit-oriented development.
Tightly connected.
Yeah, I mean,
I'm talking specifically about TODOC.
Oh, this one project.
Yeah,
I think,
that's what I'm talking about.
Okay.
These are for the next 12 months. Is I want us to finally make.
Is there a staff update? Because we met with Avalon Bay. Did they commit last week? And we already see.
they haven't signed the contract yet, but let's see. The project's in for permits. They expect to break ground this year in June or July.
So Avalon Bay's request, when Andrew and I met with them on Monday, was their fear is that we said these two projects have to go together. They're a little worried about investing tens of millions of dollars, and then the King County Housing Authority side drives
the
up.
street.
So they're just saying, I think, well, that's,
Goes away.
well,
I
think, wanted the timing to be concurrent because our fear was the private side might come a lot later.
Right.
And the private side, even though they haven't done anything yet, they're saying we're going to move fast. And our fear is we don't want to be at the whims if King County affordable housing money decides, like, if they have their own issues. So I think their question to us, right, Andrea, was, are we willing to provide some flexibility? Like once they decide to move forward, they're moving forward. They don't want to be told you can't open your doors because King County Housing Authority decided to screw around for an extra year or two. So that's their ask.
I was going to ask, we are working with them and KCHA on how to make sure that the city still gets the things that we've wanted out of this project. The city's put a lot of time, money, investment in this project. So we want to make sure that
We think their ask is not necessary. We think King County Housing Authority is going full steam ahead, and we think
so
they're worried about something we don't think is going to happen, but they're lawyers involved. So
Do they want to pass a certain point, like if their permit's vest, then they're allowed to go through no matter what, or what are they at?
they didn't propose a specific solution other than KCHA is willing to put up a bond to try to help guarantee their project will get built. So we're working through, we want to minimize risk to the city. We want to make sure these projects get built. We're going to find a solution.
All right, thank you.
this thing's going to happen.
Yeah.
I know you've heard that forever.
Smallest of the hurdles we've encountered. I will say that.
All right,
If we're on a good glide path, we don't have to talk more about it.
And I think
8 years.
And they talked about, do we need to have, basically a terrace patio for every single unit, or can it be half the units? They're asking things that were not crazy. They were just reasonable ask, I think. And I will say one takeaway I had from that conversation was what I think we're missing in the Valley floor is more rooftop outdoor space. So I think it'd be really interesting for us to have a conversation as a council, I think, around can outdoor space be a communal rooftop deck where you can go up and you can look at the Issaquah Alps, you can look towards Lake Sammamish, you can look, but not have this requirement that every single unit has to have a balcony, which is our current requirement. There's very few rooftop spaces. Like I go to, well, that place is now closed, the bistro or whatever on the islands. But I look at, every time I go there, I'm like, if there was a place up there to eat, I think it would be like hugely popular on that roof because you'd be looking west towards the Olympics and Seattle. We just, for some reason, in our city, we've never done it. Like it just hasn't happened. It's like a missed opportunity, I think. I think it's going forward. We will, and I think we're being very collaborative. There's no part of our conversations with anyone involved in the TOD project. Like we're trying to get to yes with every group we talk to.
To Tola's point of this individual building being a council priority, though, I think that's probably true. And if we want to make that, most of this will be on the administration to work out the nuts and bolts of. But if we want to make it a council priority, we could say that if anything comes up that needs to be, it needs in any way to have council involvement, that takes precedence. Something like
let's do it.
The way that we
Yep.
can be.
It's great.
And keep us updated as things go through because we're eager.
There we go.
Right now,
8 years.
95% Avalon Bay will be the private side partner, and is my guess. They had a place in the islands originally. They sold. I think that's the 115th there. Right?
And then
But so they're familiar with our community, and I think if this process goes well, I think their indication is they're open to looking at other investments on the valley floor, and so but they want to see this go.
Yeah, and to be even a little bit more specific, I think the sorts of things that could come up is, do they need some sort of deviation, and would we be willing to put that on our agenda? All right, happy about putting that on our agenda very quickly. The sorts of things. I think that's how we can make this actionable to have this priority for council.
And I would say, I think if there was a deviation of saying half the units have to have outdoor terrace, I think the question is, I think they're going to go forward. I think the deviations would be to incentivize kind of a show of, hey, we're going to be a partner if you decide to invest in building more homes in Issaquah. And so I think that would be the purpose of, because they're making it clear, like they're willing to go forward. So anything we do is kind of icing on the cake, I think, in my.
I think there'd be value in naming it. Point, right?
Yeah.
Or focus in council. It's a priority for council. Is that a kind of priority? I'm just double checking. Okay.
Great.
All right. We're humming. Okay. So
yeah, something's else.
I wanted to stop the meeting. You get up on us.
I know. I'm in trouble.
well, now let's do. We need to talk about related to transportation and mobility. So we heard about some of the mobility pieces with trails and other elements in your comments there. Are there other things that are critical path? Oh, no, didn't work.
No, it's not lights.
Maybe it is.
Fan. Yeah, it's the fan that
deals the vent.
Yeah.
Do we need to talk about Metroflex alternatives? Well, should we do a brainstorm list like we did for housing?
Sure.
Yep.
For interest of time, Andrea, can you rattle off what we're going to talk about on?
I would love to. So we have a couple of presentations lined up. One is on PMP, Pavement Management Program, which we are doing the Pavement Condition Index so we can go over the latest data on how our streets are doing. We're also going to be talking about some pavement treatment techniques the city's been piloting for the past few years. There's been some feedback from the community that they don't like the pavement treatments. There has also been some positive feedback, but so we're going to go over those. And then the policy question for that item is whether or not we should change our techniques or we should keep moving forward with the techniques we're piloting and setting a community standard for those pavement techniques and treatment techniques. The second item is going to be on Metroflex. We had promised council that we'd come back and talk about success measures and what are our goals with the project or with that program. We're also going to be providing a little bit of information about some possible alternatives and asking council whether we should investigate those more fully. And then the third.
I would say in that space, just to share kind of what we've learned, is Circuit is the one that does the bellhop. Circuit's going to Redmond. They have Via currently as the back end of Metroflex made it very clear to us. They were like at the conference of mayors, like trying to get everyone to sign up. They're they're not going to violate what they have with King County. So if we want to do anything, would be it's from King County. They will not risk the King County contract by doing something separate with us. So there is no ability to remove the middleman if we want to use via. And they're basically Circuit and Via are the two big ones. And then the third outlier is Uber. We're talking about just doing straight up Uber vouchers. So those are basically, so I would have said it's three options. Really, it's status quo or Circuit or Uber vouchers is probably going to be the lay of the land. I mean,
so all of these entities I spoke with personally over the past month, and they were supposed to give me proposals, and they have not yet. They were supposed to give me proposals last week, and this week they promised them again, and I don't have them. So if I'm gonna bring as much information as I can bring for the February 9th meeting, but otherwise we may have to keep the conversation general because I only have so much information. And then the third conversation is on the Transportation Benefit District sales tax. Again, last fall, we told council we would come back and talk about that funding and what council's priorities are for that funding. That conversation is going to help inform us shape the transportation improvement plan, which we update on an annual basis and be coming back to council for adoption in June. So having a conversation about how you want to use those funds is then going to be reflected in the TIP that you see later. So that's the general. Those are the three topics. We're also going to be providing an update on light rail and the city's efforts on light rail, which are really speeding up.
Well, and I think the last piece is really the mayor's asked us to look for small impact, small projects, high impact that we can do this year.
Yep.
So we are going to
for this, 26, 27 type projects, like projects you need to do before we do the big trail connection coming in from Salt Lake Sandwich.
And we'll be talking about that in context of the Transportation Benefit District sales tax and TIP update.
That's been a major push of the mayor's ears. Want to do something now, not just talk about it for 3 years.
So, I know the little wooden fingers.
Life issue.
Yeah, the survival rate of your Talos-based council members is
At risk.
we still gonna
Get you guys a 10 invite for Christmas.
So that's the outline of what we're planning for transportation. We'll continue moving forward, but the TIP process is soon, right?
Yeah, it goes by state law. It has to be adopted by July 1st. And so we take it to TAB and a few other advisory boards, and then it goes to M&I, and then it goes to Council for Adoption. So we're working on it now based on Mayor Mullet's priorities that he has provided, those small, simple capital projects that can have a small impact, which adds up over time.
There we go.
Yeah, so doing a few more brainstorming things, not for this meeting, but as a topic. So Metro levy, as one topic.
Just like
Claudia's Balducci's asking us for a venue to talk about the Metro levy, because I think it sounds like, I thought you guys advised them not to go forward on the Metro levy. Are they
Focus on transportation specifically? Is that
Metro's King County Metro.
It's one of the buses.
okay. Yeah.
Yes.
On that, I think one of the things that we on Eastside Transportation Partnership want to do, I think with MetroFlex, the big issue that has been brought up repeatedly is just the high cost per rider, and there really is no way to bring it down significantly if you're having on-demand stuff. So with the King County Metro ballot measure, if we're able to get some, priority intra-city routes in there, that could potentially replace, some of like a large amount of trips that are made with MetroFlex, then potentially that could be deprecated, and we could get all this new funding from King County to run local buses. So that's something that we're going to be working on through Eastside Transportation Partnership and seeing to what extent we can get some of our pet projects in there.
I think
Tying that with administration in some this direct way could make it a heck of a lot more likely to.
There we go.
our challenge.
There we go.
Like if I look at the parks levy, like if you add up what we as Issaquah paid for the parks levy, I think it's $4.4 million. We have $500,000 back. But then in perspective, $4.4 million, like 10 million pays for EFR. So like basically we're paying it. So I think we have to. I think, and I'm meeting with Gramai on Monday, but I think I think we have to be really strategic as a city in supporting stuff that King County is doing, because basically the stuff they fund ends up benefiting Seattle 10 times more than it benefits us. We're funding all the improvements that are happening in Seattle. So we have to, and the Parks Levy is the poster child of that. Like, we could be doing a crap load of stuff that 4.4 million our residents are paying for parks was just half of it was coming back to us. I mean, so this is and I come into the King County Metro Levy conversation of just a fear that once again, they're going to use our residents to subsidize transit service in Seattle.
Yeah, I understand that. I also, if it's going to happen anyway, the more we can push ourselves into it, the better off we might be.
We have to get something out of this thing. Yeah.
That's what we're trying to work on with, using the transportation partnership. Because I think if it's like all the East Side cities, we're like, hey, if you don't put our stuff in there, we will not just not support it, but possibly even oppose it.
Yes.
And if it's
I think that's the message you want to continue to send is this is not the time to play nice. This is the time to demand that our taxpayers get a return on investment, because we haven't been with King County.
Want to be a donor.
So that's ST3.
Well, yeah, I mean, and it's like, we all love transit, so we don't want to be viewed as being anti-transit, but at some point, we can't just keep having our residents pay for investments that we just want our fair share. That's all we're asking for, I think, is our fair share. If you're going to ask us to pay and support it, like, just give us our fair share.
And then just from a council priority perspective, coordination on that would be wise.
Yeah, I think on the small projects front, I'm curious how you think about like street safety improvements. I saw that email from that guy about like, hey, I'm concerned about speeding here. Can you put in a speed bump? And the answer is we can't even begin to consider it until 2028. And I have, Fred, who is concerned about, cars speeding down her street to drop kids off at daycare. And she also, that's the same response that she gets about like putting in a speed bump, which is not something that's expensive. So I think that's something where we can explore like, is there a way to get those done, do the analysis faster, pour concrete faster, do something temporary, see how it works, and then evaluate whether to keep permanently, like those types of quality of life.
This goes to the core of how Tola opened the whole meeting and your example, right? Is that the initial investigation on that was the speeds were not as high. So it seemed like a little bit more of a, so then you ran the risk, I think, of putting in a speed bump, then having 10 come out and say, I can't believe you put speed bumps in on 25th. Like, that was not like, and so this is the balancing act. Like, to me, like the middle ground, which we haven't, I think deserves a lot more, looking at, is the little signs that just flash and tell you when you're going too fast, because that is not a speed bump. And it's not a ticket. It's just, and I will say, just anecdotally, when I get flashed saying slow down because you're going 10 over, I usually do slow down. Because I'm like, oh shit, I realized I was going that fast. So those things do work, and they're kind of a middle ground way that you can slow down speeds without making physical changes that might piss off the other 75% of the people that don't want to have to drive over speed bumps every single time they come in or out of their neighborhood, which sometimes is 8 or 10 times a day. So
I think that's a good potential solution. I think one thing that might be getting at a bigger issue is, from the perspective of customer service, how can we at least answer these questions in a more timely manner, even if the answer is in any business I interact, best way to make me annoyed is I'm told I have to. Nobody ever wants the package.
Or not even
One of the council priorities. It's always. I think I doubt there's anybody who's going to say don't want worse customer service, right? So
it's a priority of the administration regardless.
Exactly.
So it doesn't have to be your priority.
As far as it's not obvious that.
See, it's catchy. There we go.
Into that, and if there's any, I don't know how council gets involved in that.
I mean, this is the whole reason how the customer service discussion came up, for all the reasons you just said. I think that person is probably frustrated with the city of Issaquah right now, because they basically got a very governmental answer. So it's a challenge, right? I mean.
So I'm not sure I see a strategy or a set of priorities within the transportation and mobility area. I've heard pavement management, light rail, small projects, Metroflex, TBD sales tax, talking about metro levy, safety challenges. I don't know That's a lot of things. I don't know what of that is our priority, and is our priority in what metrics are we looking at? What are we trying to achieve with that? Are we focusing on vehicle movement? How much of our focus is on pedestrian and bike safety? How much of it is on maintenance versus building new capacity and otherwise? I think there's a bigger set of conversations that I don't know has really happened. There
I think I would definitely say congestion relief is probably a strong approach here. It's just projects that provide congestion relief. But I think if we're in a good position to get the grant from PSRC, we just have to put up our share of the money on the Newport project. Like, I'm all for it. And I think the way we approach things as a state, if there was federal dollars in the line, that went to the top of the list. Because if we could do a project and we have to pay for 20% of it, like, it becomes, political malpractice to not pursue it. So I think coming in with not knowing where that stuff is going to lay out is a little bit harder. I think the general broad theme, I would say, is congestion relief is really important. We also want to put in sidewalks. We want to do the bike stuff when it makes sense. To be honest, those score a lot better for getting grants than just doing congestion relief projects, like fixing Front and Sunset, which is, when I say that, you're fixing the sunset part of Front and Sunset, not the front part. And we're not going to get $1 for that. Like, we're going to have to pay the entire $2.4 million to do that project. No one's going to help us out, is my guess. But these other projects, like a Newport, bike trail stuff, I think we can get a lot of money for those projects. So I think but I think the overall, if you want to know the overall theme, I would say congestion relief is definitely the immediate goal right now, kind of responding to the community, saying, what can we do where we can point to? And some of the safety stuff is like the crosswalk at Village Theater, and the idea is another crosswalk. Like, if you go from the party store across Black Nugget to where the 24-hour fitness is, we just are trying to find two places where we seem to have a lot of pedestrians crossing streets that don't seem very safe. And so I think, just to give sort of more specific examples of things we're looking at that have come up in this kind of first month of analysis.
For the next 6 months, we have to do everything we can to save light rail.
Yeah.
So at 6 months' time, it either will be there and they will double down to say, yes, we're committed to do it, or it's gone. And so either way, that's going to free up resources. We can channel the resources, different kinds of resources, new money into light rail, or if light rail is gone, then everybody who's fighting right now to keep it will have time to do it.
We cannot lose the light rail fight. I was going to say that.
That's layered on top of everything we talked about. Is the next 6 months making sure that Sound Transit.
And anytime somebody sees, every time we met with Cantwell or Murray, and somebody said something about getting light rail to Tacoma, I said, and Issaquah. I want light rail to Everett and Issaquah. Like, it was like, we all have to pound this drum. Every time you're talking to anyone on the Sound Transit board, you have to pound the drum, because everything's going to happen, like Wally said, between now and June 30th. Everything. And I know some people in here feel like
Marie Cantwell heard it from him, because Angela Burney was busy saying, I want more, I want more, I want more. And he said, but don't forget about Issaquah. And the senators each time turned to him and not the mayor of Redmond and said, and we're listening. So that advocacy at the federal level with our 2 United States senators last 4 days was really critical.
Can I ask about this Newport? Is Newport actually congestion really? The $70 million we're going to spend it?
We're not spending $70 million on Newport. You're not spending it.
Okay. If we spend 14 because we get 80 cents on the dollar from somebody else, is it congestion really?
I think it would be. I think it would flow better. I mean, it's roundabouts. It's 2 roundabouts or 3 roundabouts, right?
Well, also that would be like adding the bike.
Yeah, you'd have
that, which I bike there all the time. Every time
Sure.
I can.
Sure.
So it would like help with
But needed it all day.
inducing demand for cycling. Yeah.
Brett too. Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
I know.
Good.
Okay.
I won't worry about it.
What we'll do is we'll bring up the conversation, and then we can bring this back so you can define what you want that to look like. But light rail advocacy sounds like it might be, important to prioritize.
You bet when they're next to John.
So, all right. There we go. Final thoughts on that, said Jess.
One thing that I put on my list of things that I would like to see, I would, and I think this goes into economic development and also on some level transportation mobility. To me, mobility is about getting to destination, right? It doesn't necessarily mean, it doesn't have to mean making traffic flow better on streets. If you have a grocery store that's closer to your house that you can get to and you don't have to drive, all the better. So I think looking at the permanent uses within our neighborhoods to potentially allow neighborhood businesses. Bothell did this recently. They have a whole section of their code that we could just straight up copy into our code. Looked at it. And so that could definitely be something to investigate as well.
Is it working for them?
I mean, it's been like a few months.
Oh, okay.
So, but
It's they're hopeful that
but maybe, yeah.
because like Upper Squawk will never guess this.
Yeah.
So I know we're over time, but we skipped the last bullet. We just agree to come back to that at some point. So
The second weekend in May. Maybe the next time you get together, and that will be the top line.
We'll make sure to keep it in the.
Well, I think Councilmember Nichols, I mean, my background's finance. Like I think Kristen, we've already talked. I think she's already shifting money out of the U.S. bank account into the local government investment pool. So we start earning interest on our cash reserves. I mean, and like I got a city car, Mayor, I donated it to the fleet. I was like, there's going to be a serious attempt to try to find ways to have our budget in balance. And every time we have natural attrition in the city, Wally and I are looking at these spots. Like we're being very intentional about how we do everything, I think, this year. And I think the goal is to put us on a very sustainable fiscal path. And that's the focus. And so everything I think that we can do from the administration side, trust me, is just kind of what I think about coming to work every day.
There we go.
So weird. So
I did.
okay, that cool.
All right. So we're at time, but what I want to do is I want to just to kind of wrap us up with all of this context in mind. So a quick roundtable. So if you had to say the one thing that you're most excited about for the next year, based on what we've been talking about, you could share that. Just to kind of get into the room that I'm really excited about this hard priority. And then one word to describe how you're feeling about this next year based on it. So those two things I want to ask you to do. Let's do a quick round the table, knowing that we are technically past it.
I'm excited that we're going to get going on transit or development. And I'm just extremely optimistic about this group for the next 12 months.
Thank you, sir. Yeah.
No, and I would ditto the optimism of the group we're working with. I mean, I heard some horror stories this past week of people's mayors, how they interact with their councils. I think I'm very optimistic, and I really do want to see smart investments in transportation and parks. I mean, parks, when I say parks, I mean trails. I mean the whole kind of umbrella of that area. And so that's what I'm most excited about.
Great.
I'm excited about the discussion about the housing barriers in the future. Cautiously optimistic.
Right.
That's as happy as I get.
It's fine. We'll take it. First of all, how are you feeling? Does this feel like, did you get a lot?
I've got a lot. I'm extremely hopeful and excited. This is really interesting, exciting, and I'm really looking forward to all of this. It's hard to just pick one. I think all of these priorities are fantastic. I'm not actually, the thing that comes to mind most is just I'm excited to know one way or the other on light rail. It's what I'm most excited about. That is such a pivotal moment of our future that I just to kind of get to the answer of that is where
us all rowing together, like light rail is no better example where all 8 of us need to be rowing that boat in the same direction. And not to say that bus rapid transit isn't an option out there, but I'm just saying I think we need as a community to really say this project's important and we can do it under cost and ahead of schedule. And we want to be the pilot project so you guys actually get a win rather than public ridicule. Which has been their MO.
I'm excited to see action on all kinds of things. I mean, hearing about the builder roundtable and the housing meeting and the mayor retreat timeout budget, it feels very responsive to both the community and council needs. So,
Your one word?
oh God, action. Yes, actionable. Yeah.
The actionness of it all. Okay, Kevin.
I guess I think I'm most excited about getting to hopefully personally shovel at least a half a cubic foot of dirt. That will be the location of a transit-oriented development. Can't get much more than that, work-wise, but and then otherwise seeing us dig in and hopefully make some very good progress on housing affordability at large. If I have to pick one word, that's
To describe how you feel about next year.
optimistic.
Okay. Not cautiously, just like full optimism.
Full optimistic. That's two words.
Oh, it's hype.
Played by the rules.
Okay, I think Kevin stole my answer. I'm excited to attend the groundbreaking of the TODOC. I'm excited to ride the new shuttle bus that's going to go from Issaquah Transit Center to Tallis. That's going to be funded from the King County Metro Levy. I'm manifesting this for myself. And I'm excited to see another housing development in Central Issaquah get through permitting that's not the TODOC. So, ambitious.
And your word is
Progress.
progress. All right, very good. Only one word? One word.
Thank you.
I'm sorry, Shannon. All right, well, that is a wrap then, unless there's anything else that needs to happen here today. Great conversation. You know, lots to pull together to bring back to you in the following report. Thanks for having us to be a part of the conversation. Appreciate it.
One last piece of business. I know that Kelly and Lindsay both need Seahawk wear. Does anybody else need Seahawk wear?
I'm going to see if I can get something, but I might.
I think I got some. That's right.
I have nothing to win.
Friday is turning into Blue Monday for the council meeting.
It's sport ball, like,